This conference will now be recorded.
Brent, is that you? The BC, the big B on here?
Yeah, that's Brent, Tammy. I don't know
Okay.
if he's got audio or not, but he said he was
Okay.
going to be joining
Thank
the
you.
meeting
I
or
just wanted to confirm.
ending the meeting.
Thank you.
So it's 6:30 and looks like we got all our board members. So can we go ahead and get started, please?
Alrighty.
Sure.
Go ahead, Monique.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Monique Madrid. I'm here tonight serving as the interim administrative services manager. Welcome to the Mid-Peninsula Water District regular board meeting. And I will now call the roll. President Schmidt.
Here.
Vice President Wheeler.
Here.
Director Vella.
Here.
Director Zuka.
Here.
Director Mostasisa.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Excellent. All right. Moving right along. So election of officers. And let's start off with the position of president. I guess I'd like to open the floor for nominations.
I would like to nominate Kirk Wheeler.
Excellent. Do we have a second?
I'll second that. No, Kathy got it first.
Great. And Tammy, I'll assume you let us know if there's any public comment. I assume there's none. Okay.
There's none.
You asked him if he wants to
let's see,
accept.
are there any other? I'm sorry?
Do you want to ask Kirk if he wants to accept the nomination?
No, I don't. I don't want to ask him that.
You got no choice. Kirk, sorry.
I'm not sure at what point we implied that this was voluntary, Kirk.
Right.
I tried to help you out, Kirk, but hey.
I'll give you a chance to speak briefly, Kirk, if you would like. It's not going to do you any good, though.
No, I've been expecting it. Let's put it that way.
Okay, I guess I should ask, are there any other nominations? And Louis, your microphone's open, I assume, and same thing with Kathy. I assume that's not. Nothing else.
I'm taking this from my new iPad and I'm still trying to figure out how to do everything, but no, I don't have any other comments. Sorry, Brian.
Okay, no worries. You might need to, that sounds fine. All right, I guess, why don't we just go ahead and do a roll call vote?
Okay, Director Vella.
Yes.
Director Mostasisa, sorry.
Yes.
Director Zuka.
Yes.
Vice President Wheeler.
Yes.
President Schmidt.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think I am no longer president. So President Wheeler, you have the floor.
Okay. This is my first time running a formal meeting, and particularly on Zoom, so we'll see how it works. Our next order of business is election of a vice president. And so let me open it up for nominations.
I'd like to, if I could nominate Louis for vice president.
I'll second that one.
Do we hear any other nominations? Okay. Louis, if you're elected, will you serve? Yeah, go through that too.
I was kind of expecting it.
Yeah. Then I guess we'll have a roll call vote.
Okay. Director Schmidt.
Yes.
Okay. Director Zuka.
Yes.
Director Mostasisa.
Yes.
And let's see, who do I have left? President Wheeler
Yes.
and Director Vela.
Yes.
Okay.
President Wheeler, if I could just mention that normally this is the time that the board would recognize the outgoing board president. And may I just state on behalf of staff, we typically coordinate with the outgoing board president to, ask what they might prefer. Some have wanted in the past not to have any more plaques or gifts or anything like that. So I apologize for not reaching out to Brian before tonight, and I will promise to get that coordinated next week. So I just wanted to state that for the record, because I certainly don't want to think that we were ill prepared for Brian's transition out of the officership of president. But I wanted to make mention of that I'll coordinate with him next week and make sure that we find what he wants as the outgoing president. So that's it.
Okay, thank you for mentioning it. Let's see, so the next order of business is the agenda review, additions, deletions, and anything to be pulled from the consent calendar. I'll open it up to comments from the board.
I don't think we're going to have any public comment, but I think the next item was public comment.
And
Oh,
there
I
were
didn't-
none. Yeah, the public comment is at the bottom, and there were none submitted before the meeting, and I don't see anyone here present that is not a presenter tonight or a speaker.
I thought you'd said earlier that there were no public comments, but that's fine. So does anyone have any request to move something off of the consent agenda?
I do have a request, if I might. The item regarding the grant application, if we're going to take a vote on the consent agenda, I'd like to be able to recuse myself from item E. Just because based on previous conversations, I don't want to the extent that EKI is used as a firm to do the work, I don't want to be voting on an item that might pose a potential financial interest. So if we can just take that one separately so I can recuse myself, I can vote on the rest.
Okay, then we will remove
Kirk-
that and, pardon?
Kirk, I have a quick comment
Sure.
on the minutes and also on the I guess on the agenda as well. Tammy, on item 5B, you have delayed until next month. I was going on and I said, do we really have to say delayed? I was hoping to see postponed, because this was intentional, right? You wanted to do this yourself because of
So I just
staffing.
didn't want anybody to think that we were deleting it or not having it. It just wasn't ready due to the fact that we had an unexpected retirement last week. But
Correct.
the other reason is because as we bundle the agenda package for preparation, all the other staff reports were done. If I would have deleted that, we would have had to go back into the system and renumber them. So it just worked better to put a statement out there to show that the financials and the expenditures report will be, delayed, and maybe the wording postponed could have been, but they'll be here next month.
Okay, all right, got it. That's fine. I mean,
I wanted it
would
for
have,
the record too,
and
so that
I agree with you. I would have preferred the word postpone, because that kind of implies that it was intentional, was done, not just. But either way, the message is still the same. Okay.
understood.
All right, good. And on the minutes, I need to find it now. A couple of things. On the minutes on line 217, it says, advise the committee is a good idea to appoint Vice President Wheeler and Director Vela. I think it was not appoint, it was suggested only. and we're going to be discussing it today.
So you want to change the word appointed to suggested?
Yes, please,
Okay.
because we're going to be discussing it today anyway. Okay. And also on that same item, Tammy, why is there like absent Vice President Wheeler and Director Mostasisa? We didn't take a vote on that one, right? On line
I was just going to
220.
bring up that I'd like to abstain for the minute.
Yeah, I was going to bring up that same point since I was not here.
Okay.
So I think it was just noted that during the director reports, because you're all usually listed, you know, each and every one of you, even if you have no report, it was just mentioned and noted that neither one of those directors were here. Yeah, Vice President Wheeler was out and so was Director.
Correct. Yeah, we knew that. Yeah, when there was a vote taken, yeah, it's understandable that they will be mentioned because they couldn't vote. But
Yeah.
on that one, you know, I didn't see the reason why, but because there was no vote taken. And then
Well,
my other,
and so it would have just had two directors reporting. We just thought that if it just looked like maybe the other ones didn't report out. So that's fine. I mean, if the rest of the board and everybody agrees, we won't list that anymore. If there's absent board members under director reports, we'll just leave whoever reports reporting.
correct. Yeah, I thought that's what we normally do anyway. Whoever reports is listed and whoever doesn't report is not listed.
Fair enough.
And then my other comment was going to be more of a question, but and I think Director Zuka kind of hinted towards that. And my question to you, Tammy, was: didn't we hear from the engineer from Anona last time that the water storage tanks may not qualify for the grant?
I don't know that she used those words. It's going to be a challenge because of all the other competitive projects, but there is an opportunity for the Tacoma Tanks project to be applied for, and that's how we presented it. We presented it from a sustainability standpoint and the fact that it's the last tank site and that there's infrastructure or seismic issues with it. So we feel like we have a good opportunity depending on the other applications that might be filed.
Okay, all right. If you think we stand even a remote chance, you know, I have no problem with that, you know.
Yeah,
But
we think it's worth it.
because of that, you know, you lose the credibility to the other grant. Then I wanted to be a little bit cautious about that. But if you think that we stand a chance to get both, I mean, hey, why not? We'll give it a shot. All right. Very good. That's it, Kirk. Thank you.
So should we have separate votes on A and E and then accept the rest of the consent agenda? I'm not sure what the best procedure is in this.
I think you can call for the vote, Kirk, and then whoever is going to abstain from voting, they will state exactly what they're voting for and what they're abstaining for. And that's it.
That's fine.
You say,
Okay.
you know, I approve, except for, and I abstain from item 5E and item 5 whatever. And then whoever was absent will probably abstain from the approval of these minutes because they weren't here. That's all.
Good. Then I will entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I so move.
I'll second.
So, Ms. Madrid?
So we should have a roll call vote on this.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Okay. Director Vela,
Yes.
Director Schmidt,
Yes.
Director Mostasisa,
Yes, and I abstain from agenda item 5A.
okay. Director Zuka,
Yes on items A through D, recusal on item E.
Okay, and President Wheeler.
Yes on items B through E and recuse, or not recuse, but abstain from item 5A.
Okay.
Perfect.
So with that, there are no hearings or appeals. So going on to item 7A, resolution related to MPWD capital projects for Dukoven tank utilization and Oak Knolls Drive improvements.
Okay, Rena,
Yes, so,
you guys ready?
yeah, thanks. So that's my project. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is a capital project, and I just want to start out by saying this capital project is not funded, but what we want to do is, because of the discussion we had in October, to try and get to that finish line, to try and get to the point where we've expended all of the certificates of participation dollars. We just want to make sure that we have a project in waiting, so to speak, so that in the event that a particular project that we have currently near the end of design or maybe under construction is kind of held up for or delayed or whatever, we have another shelf-ready project that we can put out to bid. So this project and this resolution authorizes a professional services contract in the amount of $402,000 with Mott MacDonald, and also provides for a 10% contingency for the engineering services with Mott MacDonald, and also authorizes a task order 22-14 in the amount of $25,000 with District Engineer Packport Consulting Group for engineering or district engineer support services. A little bit of the history, Mott MacDonald was one of 4 consulting engineers that back when we started the capital improvement program back in 2016, we brought to the board. And actually it was in May of 2017 that, after staff had spent time soliciting requests for qualifications from engineers, we had culled a list of 20 professional firms that showed some interest. We had 10 firms that submitted proposals, and we shortlisted 6 engineering firms back in 2017, early 2017. And of those 6, we came up with a list and we're in the process of recommending a list for on-call engineers. And the larger projects that we used this on-call list were for the PAMP State Route 101 crossing, when the board awarded a contract to West Yost Associates. The second contract was with Schaff and Wheeler, and they are the design engineers for the Old County Road projects. And then the last capital project that we used the on-call engineering services was with Hydroscience Engineers. So we had not had an opportunity to use McDonald, though they were on the on-call list, and we decided to engage them to see if they had the availability and the interest to help us prepare engineering plans and specifications for this project, so that if we were in need of having a shelf-ready project, that we could do so. So district engineer and myself had a few conversations with Mott MacDonald. They prepared a scope of work. I've attached their scope of work, and what their scope of work entails is there's 2,400 lineal feet of pipe for the Dukoven utilization project that they're going to be designing for us to replace existing pipes of various sizes. There's also a 6-inch cross-country, 2 cross-country easements that we're going to be looking to abandon. There's a couple of fire hydrants that we're going to be installing, and then replacing 14 existing customer services with our current service standard. And then the Oak Knoll project, there's another almost 1,000 lineal feet of 8-inch ductile iron and 4-inch PVC pipe that we're going to replace. I'm sorry, 4-inch PVC pipe and cast iron pipe that we're going to replace with ductile iron pipe. and again, some new hydrants to install along Oak Knoll Drive where there are none now. And then 33 customer services, we're going to upgrade them to our current 1-inch standard. The amount of work that Mott McDonald is going to conduct, I was just looking at their hours. They have planned for almost 2,000 hours, 1,959 hours of engineering support services, mainly from their engineer 3s and engineer 2s, and they have, of course, project manager. But then there are also some support firms. We've got a surveyor, a company doing potholing, and going to use some closed circuit TV to take a look at one of the easement lines to see if we can line it instead of having to replace it. There's some environmental consulting and also some cathodic protection consultant. So typically, this is what we ask for from the consulting firms. And we allow them to prepare what they believe to be the scope of work. And Juben and I took a look at their scope of work. It didn't seem unusual. It isn't cheap. It's $400,000. And I was trying to recall, I did pull up one of the older projects like the Hydroscience or the PAMP project just to kind of compare. But I sense that, you know, that the cost for this has probably gone up a little bit since we had engineers do the design work back in 2017, 2018 for the other capital projects. So we're hoping that the board will authorize the work so that we can get it started. And then at mid-year, we will come before the board because we do have the capital reserve funds that we can use right now to fund this. But the idea would be that if we needed to expend some of the certificates of participation, then we would do some accounting work to make sure that this project would get charged to the certificates of participation. And so that's kind of the general story of what we're doing. And we'll just, Juben, I don't know if you want to add anything before we see if the board members have any questions of staff with regard to this this capital project.
The only thing I'd like to add is that these were the next batch of projects that were on the capital list. So these were high priority projects in that out of the 90 projects that we have on the capital list, this was the next batch. So we packaged up 2 of the bigger ones, and that's why it's in 2 different locations. But it's pretty typical of projects for the district. The project that's out for or is about to start construction is the same way. It's in different locations. We batch it up together to get a good design cost and also construction cost. So for bidding purposes, I just wanted to mention that these are on the capital list and the next batch, as Rena has in his report. That's all.
Thank you. Thanks, Juben. So with that, I'll end my presentation and see if the board members have any questions.
Louis, I think you have your mic on.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Rena. No, very nice. Good, very detailed. A couple of quick questions. Number one, sometimes we see these contracts are not to exceed, but we're not seeing that here. When do we do that? When do we do not to exceed so that we would know exactly where we're going to be, and when do we not, like this one? That was kind of my first comment. And then the second thing that I wanted to ask is to either Rena or Juben, given the supply chain problem that we've been hearing on TV ad nauseum, do you feel comfortable to do this kind of work now? And given the middle of the year, you think that the materials will be available and we could go ahead with it? Remember what we went through with this project before, when we had to kind of, you know, refuse all the bids prior, and we came back. So tell me a little bit about that, Juben or Rena, please.
Rena, I could take that if you'd like.
That's fine. Sure, go ahead, Juben.
Director Vela, this is a time and material contract with not to exceed. So it is set up as a time and material. The price that is there is not to exceed without authorization from the district. So it is set up that way. All of our contracts are set up that way. We do not contract as a lump sum, which is the other type of contract, which is we pay a certain price, no matter how fast the consultant does the work. This is a time and material. Basically, we're charged by the hour, but there's a cap on it, and they can't exceed that cap without coming back to the district and asking and justifying, you know, the exceeding. So I just wanted to answer that first. The second part of your question, there's absolutely a supply chain issue right now. The project that was awarded to C2R last month, we're talking with the contractor to see when they can start. And part of the reason that they can't start right away is because that materials are not readily available. The difference between this type of project, Director Vela, and the tank project, is that this is a pretty common type of project. It's a waterline project. So even though there's supply delays, it's not a one-off project where it's not done. I wouldn't say all the time, but water main projects are pretty common. So the design work, you got to remember, it's about an 8 or 9 month lead time for the design. So if you give us the go ahead to start design, these folks won't start until January 1st-ish, and the project won't be ready to go out to bid until October, September, you know, timeframe. So we just want to have a project that's shovel ready, and we could always decide not to go out to bid, right? We could have the project designed and decide not to go out to bid, but I wouldn't hold back the design because of some of the supply disruptions that we're seeing now. I'm hoping it will get resolved, and even if it doesn't get resolved, these projects are pretty common. So I would feel comfortable saying that we can even go out to bid even if we have some disruptions.
Okay, very good. President Wheeler, if I may, one more thing. So, Juven, out of curiosity, okay, and this is with all due respect to all the attorneys listening right now, but when we engage the services of professionals, you know, legal especially, and engineers and all that, and we pay time and material, out of curiosity, how do you verify the hours? Because usually when I use the services of an attorney, whatever bill they send, I pay, and I go like, how do you know how many hours was spent on this? And I was kind of curious, you know, how do you verify that?
Well, you verify it in that I don't know if you're asking if looking at this, if it looks good, or if you're asking when they actually spend the time, how you verify it.
It's when they actually spend the time. Let's say they're doing a part of the design and they say we spend, you know, 85 hours on it. How do you know if it was 85 or 25? How do you do that? You just
Well, I could tell you that we have the right per our contract to ask for timesheets. We have the right to ask for backup documentation. But you know, there's no one there to you know, see that, you know, they're actually working on it versus charging time if someone's not working on it. But Director Vela, I have to tell you, I mean, that's a very unethical, unprofessional manner, and it's in my professional dealings, it's highly looked down upon. I mean, it's very unprofessional and unethical, and the reputation of these companies is based on what they deliver and how they treat their customers and clients. And so when we go through the interview process, we talk to their clients, we talk to, you know, their past performance, especially the project managers. So this isn't a one-off type firm. These are reputable companies that, so I honestly, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I could tell you that it's somewhat, you have to trust the professionals to do their professional job. That's why you're hiring them. You're hiring an attorney, you're hiring engineers, and it comes with their reputation. You know,
Well, I was just gonna add that, you know, my monthly review of district council's bills, and first of all, we've worked together long enough, but they're split out by task, and then very detailed, you know, here's what we did, here's what we worked on, and I mean, so when I'm reviewing that, I'm looking over there at the time, and I'm typically familiar with almost everything that they've been working on. And I would know if something stuck out and I said, you spent 2 hours looking up the word, jurisprudence. I mean, I'm being facetious, but you know what I'm
Sure,
saying,
sure.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So to me, it falls upon us, right? To look at these bills, to do what Jubin and Rena did when they value engineered this, if you will, when they reviewed it before presenting it tonight, and then to track it when the bill comes in. We don't just sign off on it. It's reviewed thoroughly. And same thing with, our bills. Even when the district engineer submits their bills to us and the district council and other vendors submit their bills, they're reviewed.
It's normal for the consultant when they submit their monthly invoice for payment that they usually have backup saying this particular engineer's person worked on this particular task within the scope of work, so many days and so many hours in that particular day. So they break it down and they put together this large table that you see on the screen here, after years and years and years of doing this stuff. And I imagine, directors Zuka and Wheeler can kind of, also weigh in on this, and they're used to seeing these, and they know how much time and experience it takes to develop this kind of scope of work, and the number of hours it takes for different folks in the disciplines to put together a project. But it's a good question, Director Vela, and as Jubin says, we have to trust that these people are professionals. And they're not trying to pull it over on the district. But on our side, again, we use their scope of work, and then we use their invoices to kind of keep track and making sure that they're in line. And when they start getting close to the end of their the project and the end of their budget, if we see that maybe they're billing more than maybe what they've got done, we're calling them and asking, hey, what's going on here? It looks like you guys have billed more than you spent, hours. But that would be very unusual, very unusual.
Very good. Thank you. And Jubin, to your question, I don't, Jubin is still here. Okay, to your question about ethics and all that, I perfectly understand. The example that I was making is that with an attorney that I engaged personally, sure, you ask questions and then you pay. But when I'm dealing with somebody else's money, then I would like to be a little bit more attentive to that. And it is not a question of, not hiring professional, not ethical and all that. But I had a situation where I had a very highly reputable firm, okay, doing some appraisal work. And sure enough, they were off. And it was not by a little, it was by a lot. And if I went ahead and just paid the check as I normally did with everybody else, it would have gone and nobody would have said anything. But I questioned it, and I went back to their timesheets and all that, and they were so apologetic. They said, we missed it, we were sorry, and it was a lot. It was not easy. So that's why I wanted to kind of bring this up, because especially when we're signing off on this, we're signing off with the district money, not my personal money. My personal money comes and goes, whatever, but district money is a little bit more important to me. So
You're
that's
right.
all.
We
Thank
agree.
you. Thank you.
Okay, let's see, Brian, you're the next one on my list of faces that has their mic on.
Okay, thanks. So I will follow up on Lewis's questions about expense, and I did email Tammy and Rena saying I had a question about the level of expense in this project. Jubin, I should have emailed you too. But starting off with that, I'm not an expert in this stuff. It just seems like a lot of money for a project that does not seem that complicated to me, primarily replacement of pipelines. So I don't know if staff or board members who have more experience in this can comment on that, on why it takes 2,000 hours of engineering time to do this. That might be helpful for me. And if I could also, another component of that is, my recollection is that there's generally considered a certain ratio of design to construction costs. And if it's anticipated that ratio is going to hold out here. And finally, should that ratio be a little bit lower in something that, again, looks to me like a relatively simple design compared to other things we've done. And I'm glad, Rena, you went back and looked at PAMF, but PAMF seemed like a more complicated project to me. Although, again, I'm talking from a non-expert position. So anything that can help help me understand the expense would be helpful.
So what Tammy has put up here is at the end of the report, there were 2 project description sheets that are in our capital improvement program. The board may be somewhat familiar with them. Actually, Brendan Lowry, who's in the meeting, I think he prepared a lot of these, and they're prepared by Jubin's office, and they kind of describe the project. They give, you see on the right-hand side, the project background. They talk about the different proposed improvements and the benefits. And then they talk about the budget. You see, it says project budget 2020. So these are 2020 dollars. And based on the experience that the district engineer's office has with the construction of pipeline type projects of this size and magnitude, they place some cost estimates. We kind of get a ballpark idea of what we might anticipate for the construction of the 12-inch pipe, 2,400 foot of that, the installation of some fire hydrants and the service connections. But then on top of that, you see they have planning, design, and construction support, $210,000. Again, that's an estimate. I might let Jubin and or Brandon talk a little bit about that, but it gives an idea for us for planning purposes what we might expect if we were to engage a professional engineer to provide, designing services for this size of project. And you've got construction inspection in there as well, that we might anticipate, about $140,000 to have somebody inspect the job while it's being constructed by our contractor. And then we throw a contingency number in there to give a rough ballpark idea. So if we take a look at this one for the Decoven utilization, the engineering, planning, design, and construction support was about $210,000. And Tammy, go down to the next one, which is the Oak Knoll project. And if we look at the planning, design, and construction support, that's $190,000. So the 2 of them are $400,000. So it's just an estimate, and really it's going to depend on the scope of work, what the engineer who we've asked, in this case Mott McDonald, to tell us what do they think is going to be necessary in order for them to design the project. And they've got some work in there ahead of time. They want to do some potholing to find out what's underneath the street that might be in the way. They want to do some closed circuit TV videoing of one, I think it's one of the cross country easement lines, to see what kind of condition it is, to see if we could use that line and just slip line a pipe inside. There's just different additional costs. I went and just took a look at the Mott McDonald numbers here before the meeting started, because I saw that the board member Schmidt had asked, and so they have proposed 1,959 hours of work to do the engineering for the plan specifications, and their cost is $327,000, a little over that. So when you divide the two, it works out that their average hourly rate's $167 an hour, even though if you take a look at the top of, Tammy, go up to page 66 for that big chart. That one there, if you take a look at the top, you'll see the different categories of labor up there. So you see the project principal up at the top row, the first row of the employees, and that person's salary is $340 an hour. The main work is going to be done by the engineer 3 and the engineer 2. Between the 2 of them, they have close to 1,000 hours of labor or their time. And if you take a look at their hourly rates, they're almost they're in excess of $150 an hour. So it's a matter of how much time is going to be necessary to put together the plans and specifications, and then what the hourly rate is, and it is what it is. What we take a look at is whether or not we think that the level of effort that they're saying is going to be necessary makes sense to us. And from our experience, we feel that this is not unreasonable, and it appears that it's a good scope. But you never know what's going to happen, and that's why we're asking the board also to give us a contingency of $40,000 in case there's just something out there that we're not even aware of, so that we could continue the process. But if something were to happen and the engineer felt that there was even more, we'd have to come back to the board and say, board, this is what's happening. We might need some more budget, but that's not where we're at right now. Your question is this reasonable? And it's a lot of money, so do we think it's fair? And I mean, I think Jubin and I, we've seen these now quite a bit, and Jubin's seen them a lot more than I have here in the region. And we think their scope of work is a fair assessment of what we believe is going to get a set of plans specifications so that we could put this project out to bid if we feel that we need to during calendar year 2022.
Director Schmidt, I can also add that the CIP sheets that Tammy was showing you, those numbers that we develop are purely based on the multiplier that you were talking about, right? So we look at the total cost and apply a multiplier for design and multiplier for inspection. The larger the project, the smaller that multiplier is because of the savings that we could see. This project, although it is on residential streets, it is not as easy as it looks in that there is, the streets are extremely narrow and extremely crowded as far as utilities go. So it will take a fair amount of engineering to thread the needle between the existing utilities. So that was something that we spoke with Mont McDonald on, especially as you go down to Coben and then hang a right on where our border is with Cal Water. So it is residential streets, but it is somewhat complicated. Also included in this, Director Schmidt, is construction support hours. So when the project goes out to construction, the engineer is there to support. And lastly, we've added cost to this project for the consultant to do the environmental work. That's typically something we do in-house, but we're busy with other projects, so we wanted to do a turnkey. So it added about $15,000 to $20,000 to this project. And there's a lot of other subs in relation to the cross-country water main that we're going to be reinstituting. So it's not just work on the street. They're doing a lot of, that's on the next sheet, Tammy, if you can go to that, Oak Knoll. What we're trying to do is we're trying to put back a water main that has been out of service. So that takes a fair amount of engineering to put that back in service. So it looks easy, but I could tell you it's not as easy as it looks per se. And looking at the level of effort, you could always, dive in and start looking at this. But I could tell you that, looking at it at the level we're looking at, Rena and I felt that it was fair for right now how busy folks are and the fact that we want to have a shovel-ready project. Looking at construction costs, construction costs will only go up. So the cheapest time to do this project is now. And we felt that this was a fair proposal for the work we're getting.
President Wheeler, if I could follow up briefly, I think that was really helpful from Juven and Rena. I did have one follow-up though. Juven mentioned construction support being part of this contract. I didn't see that reading the contract. Maybe I missed something. And I did see there was some type of forms that would be prepared for after the fact records. But if you can just verify that's the same thing. And is construction inspection, is that also part of this contract?
Construction inspection is not part of this contract, but the support during construction, they have 224 hours budgeted for construction support, and then post-construction, they have another 114 hours of post-construction support. So they are included in this, but inspection is not.
It's tasks 5 and 6, Director Schmidt.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Tasks 5 and 6.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Yeah, and I wasn't saying I'm going to oppose this based on an intuition. It just seemed kind of expensive. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Fair questions.
And let's see, Matt, you have your microphone on?
Yeah, just a couple questions. Nothing. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Percentage-wise, it seems a little high, but it doesn't bother me too much personally, because you've got two different technologies that you're doing. You're doing both, dig in, and you're doing CIP, and you got different subs and everything else. So it's kind of seems complicated that way. We're also at the top of the hill. So, I remember we've run into a couple situations with some rock up there and the geotech, and some of that can get kind of tricky. So. And it's always tight threading the needle through streets and narrow utilities with water pipelines. I guess what I was going to comment on is mostly just that is the geotech. I remember we did have one project that, I don't know, it was years ago, but that contractor, instead of weeks, was months jackhammering through bedrock, and it wasn't up this hill, but it was up another hill in Belmont at the top. So just to make sure that we're doing that, and hopefully that they're it sounds like they have some utility potholing. Hopefully they'll find it if they're looking for it. But I didn't know if there was a need to have actually geotech done to make sure that we're not going to be running into any kind of long stretches of bedrock that result in cost increases in the field. So actually, I was going the other way. I was wondering whether you had enough scope, Juven.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Director Zuka. When you're looking for rock, rock will always be in the location where you don't drill.
Don't put the hole, right? No, I understand.
Right, so that's the problem. We have a really good geotechnical report for the tank, which is right next to this water main we're putting in, right? That tank site where we just designed. What we intend to do, we've talked to the designer, they're going to be doing a bunch of potholing. So potholing, essentially, they're going to be digging down in different areas trying to find utilities. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to find rock, but we're going to use that as a gauge. And honestly, what we've tried to do in this case is we're going to kind of feel that out and see if it's something that we need to add. Right now, geotechnical investigation is not part of this contract. And the reason being is that we feel like we have a good report with the Dekoven tank project. And then if the potholing yields other results, we'll kind of regroup and say, hey, maybe we should add it. But those rock clusters that you're talking about, they're outcroppings, right? They're like kind of rock outcroppings. And it's really hard to find that, right? Like unless you do like a bore every, 15 feet or 20 feet as you go up, so it's something we're aware of, Director Zuka. I'm not going to guarantee we're not going to have a problem with it, but it's something we're aware of and we've talked about it and we're going to try to find a way to deal with it. So.
Yeah, and that's great. I just thought I'd ask. I mean, all the previous comments are spot on, I think, in terms of the cost. I mean, I looked at it first too and went, oh my God, wait a second, what? And then I look at the construction and everything else. But I'm personally fine with the contract. I did have one minor issue, and it's actually I'm surprised that we're giving ownership of work and we're allowing the consultant to have no liability whatsoever if we reuse their work. I never got that good of an agreement when I was in consulting, so I'm surprised at how generous we're being with the third-party reliance language on it. I don't know if that's our standard or not, but if we get a report and we use it, I don't know. It seems like we should have some ability to then have other people rely on that work. I get that there can be third-party reliance issues, and the consulting side of me cringes when I hear that word. But I also look at it from looking at the district's perspective. Are we giving up too much by in the contract saying that they have no liability whatsoever? We might not discover the liability as a district until we're using it for another purpose. And so I just don't know if that releases us from any recourse on that front, but I don't need an answer from council. I just thought I'd point it out. That's it. Thank you.
And Kathy, you have your mic on.
I do. I just have, I think, kind of more of a general question to figure out how all of the projects that you've brought before us with respect to the Dekoven project work together. So the first meeting that I had, we rejected the bids because the bids were way over, and we just approved the grant. And then now we're being asked to approve for this consulting project. My question is, when we went out the first time to get the bids, did we already do all of the consulting prior to? And if so, is there a way to kind of reuse some of the information we got before? I don't know if I'm making sense with that question.
No, that's a really good question, Director. I could tell you that even though both projects have the name Dekoven on it, they're two different distinct projects. So the first one that got rejected was a tank project. And Tammy, if you could put your cursor on where the tank is, which is right at the it's right there, yeah, a little bit further south. And this is a pipeline project. So I know it's a little bit confusing. I'm sorry, we kind of recycled the name DeKalvin just because it's on the street DeKalvin. But this is a totally different project in that one was a tank and this is a bunch of water main. So we are going to be utilizing, as I mentioned to Director Zuka, we are going to be trying to recycle or reuse some of the reports like the geotechnical report or any like the traffic control or other things that we learned from that project. But this is a totally separate type of project.
And I'll just add, hence my third-party reliance question from before. It was based on what you said in your statement, Juven. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, Kathy.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Juven. And then so just so I'm clear on everything, the grant project is not the same as this one. It's for the tanks.
That's correct. Yes, the grant is for the tank, which separate from this project. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to add one last comment, and that was at the beginning when we talked about bundling these two projects. Just for the board's, for clarification, the Oak Knoll improvements here, the reason why we actually advanced it is because we're coordinating with the city of Belmont. They're going to be reconstructing this entire length of Oak Knoll in early 2023 to mid 2023. So we're coordinating with them so that we can get this pipeline in ahead of their roadway reconstruction. So it's a very important project anyway, but we definitely stay on top of our meetings with the city of Belmont and ensuring that we're getting our infrastructure in the ground in a timely manner.
Okay, I just had a couple of comments. I was also surprised at how expensive it was. It wasn't until I saw these project descriptions that they started to make a little more sense as far as some of the uncertainties associated with these types of pipeline projects on these small streets with a lot of unknown utilities. I saw some of what was going on Oak Knoll when one of the homeowners had to dig up the connection to the main to expand a service. And Rena's crew was out there for 3 days digging in the street and shutting down traffic. So it always is more complicated. But I get the level of effort and I appreciate all of the presentation. So if there are no additional questions or comments, we can take a motion on it.
I'll move to approve.
I second.
Okay, then we require a roll call vote.
Monique's usually used to just taking minutes, so she now knows she's got to call for that roll call vote. Your microphone is muted still, Monique, on screen.
Sorry, my mouse was not cooperating. Okay, Director Zuka?
Yes.
Vice President Vela?
Yes.
Director Schmidt?
Yes.
Director Mostasisa?
Yes.
And President Wheeler?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is 7B, task order 2021-37 in the amount of $20,000 with PAC4 Consulting Group.
Yes, thank you. So this is my agenda item as well. So we're asking the board to consider resolution 2021-37, which authorizes a task order 2215 in the amount of $20,000 of PAC4 Consulting Group. Now this is in support services for the DeKoven tank project, subsequent to the rejection of the bids for construction several months ago. If you recall, we talked about after that what we wanted to do was take a look at the amount of water storage capacity that we need to have. We've recognized that our customers are conserving water, so we told ourselves, well, maybe we need to do a little bit of thinking about whether or not we need to have 2 3/4 million gallon tanks on DeKoven from a storage standpoint, a fire need standpoint, and then even water quality. And then also take a look at different materials for the construction if it can't be steel. And there are some other minor matters. So again, just bringing this back to the board, recognizing that this is above and beyond the original agreement we had with Packport Consulting to do the design services. So we want to bring this before the board to get their approval on it. So if you take a look at the task order that is a part of this, again, it just talks about what they are going to be doing for us. And if the board does approve it, adds $20,000 to this particular design project. It's going to bring the amount of money that we spent on the design process for the DeKoven tanks to almost $338,000. But we feel that it's necessary for us to kind of continue to move forward with the DeKoven tank process, and it definitely might come in handy if we get the grant and we have to modify anything. Then we will be ready for that. So. With that, I'm going to end my discussion here and see if the board members have any questions with regard to this particular agenda item.
Okay. I'm not seeing anyone raising their, oh, Matt?
Yeah, real quick, and I'll end it with a motion to approve. But on the second page of the staff report, there's a mention about not taken into account at this time is the contract with EKI approved by the board in November. I don't recall approving a contract with EKI in November. Did we actually approve? I think we gave direction. The board gave direction about the desire for additional data. And I'm not sure I understand. I just want to understand.
That probably just a poor choice of wording, Director Zuka, on my part.
Great, thank you. And with that, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
Oh, okay.
Was that second, Director Smith?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Monique, sorry.
Okay, Director Zuka,
Yes.
Director Schmidt,
Yes.
Director Mostasisa,
Yes.
Vice President Bella,
Yes.
President Wheeler.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 8A. Received the report on the MPWD PARS Trust.
Thank you. So this is your annual report that is delivered to the board. And for a little background for Director Mostasisa, this is about the district's 115 trust plan, where the OPEB, that's the other post-employment benefits, and the pension rate stabilization program are held. It's a federally protected trust, hence the name Section 115. The board established, and I tried to give a little more history back in 2011, and you'll hear from this team who's been in place pretty much since I've been here in 2012 about the not only what's come in and out of the plan, but also what the investments looked like for the past year. So I'd like to introduce Jennifer Meza. I believe she's going to start out. She's the consulting manager with PARS, and she will start the presentation and then turn it over, and I'll be happy to scroll through your PowerPoint, Jennifer. Just let me know, okay?
Perfect, thank you. And then good evening, board president and members of the board. Thank you so much for having us here today. I know we're still continuing our Zoom meetings, but we wanted to make sure to provide you with an update on the program itself. If we go to the first slide, Tammy. This is just our contact information. At any point, if the board or the districts have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Slide number 3. The program itself is administered by 3 different parties. Under the program, the first company where Will Rogers and I are from is PARS. We're the ongoing trust administrator and consultant for the plans itself. Just to give some background, I know we haven't given some background in the past, but just for the new member. Currently, PARS does serve only public agencies. We serve California, Texas, and the East Coast as well. We are the dominant provider in Section 115 programs. Under this program as well, you have U.S. Bank, safeguarding and protecting the assets for the exclusive benefit that the district went ahead and put the assets for. And in addition to that, these assets, you can diversify these accounts. Unlike your general fund, very restricted, no stock exposure. You do certainly have the ability to do that within a Section 115 trust, and you have the assistance and guidance of Highmark Capital Management assisting you with that on the account. The Section 115 trust does have 2 components. First, the district can use it to put money aside for retiree healthcare obligations. And secondly, you can put it aside for pension obligations as well. This could be for unfunded liability or ongoing normal cost as well. So some agencies such as yourself are fully funded in one area, but continue to fund monies for those costs that are going to come in the future for active employees that are still earning that benefit and so forth. If we go to the next slide, slide number 4, we're going to go ahead and break this presentation down into 3 separate sections. First, we talk about the administrative portion of the OPEB plan. Then we talk about the OPEB liability. Then we're going to talk about the pension portion of the account. And then we're going to talk about the investments on the account. So you may see some things later on in the presentation and so forth, but at any time, please stop us if you have any questions or concerns. I'm going to turn it over to Will to start discussing the administrative portion of the OPEB plan.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. Again, my name is Will Rogers over here at PARS. We can see here on this page the summary of the OPEB side of the program. We can see the current investment strategy, which is the Moderate Highmark Plus. It is an active strategy. As a reminder, Randy will touch on a little bit later exactly what it's comprised of and how it's been performing. As a reminder to the board and the district, we're not locked into this particular strategy through conversations with Tammy and team in the past. Back in 2017, the strategy was updated, so you are not locked in, but this has been the selection since then. Bottom half here, these numbers we can see are as of October 31st. We can see the initial contribution back in August 2011, a little over 81,000. Since then, additional 2.9, almost 3 million for total contributions there. Small disbursements recently, about 62,000. Net investment earnings, a little over 1 million for a current account balance, again, as of October 31st, a little over $4 million. Tammy, if you can go to the next page, please. This page here is broken down the contributions, disbursements, and total assets as of plan year end. We can see the consistent contributions the district has done year over year, and most recently with the status of almost fully funded, we have the idea to initiate the disbursements, and so that's why we see that distribution back in fiscal year end June 21. If we go to the next page, please. This is where we evaluate the most recent actuarial valuation provided to the district. This is numbers generated by Total Compensation Systems. We wanted to highlight some of that data for you tonight, just to kind of point out. This program, as of measurement date June 30, 2021, covers 24 participants. That is 19 actives and 5 retirees. If we go to the next page, please. This is where we like to highlight the information. Looking on the right-hand column with the most recent data, June 30, 2021, we see that total OPEB liability about 3.68 million. Assets at this time were a little over 4 million. So we can see that we are fully funded and overfunded at about 108%. But as Jennifer alluded to earlier, this is changing. There's an ongoing service at normal cost. And so that's what we're anticipating moving forward. But at this point in time, we can see even from the most recent year, June 30, 2020, the district is now fully funded. And so I just wanted to say, we don't see that a lot with a lot of districts and a lot of public agencies. So you guys, kudos to you guys. You guys have made consistent contributions And I think you guys should be very proud of that 108% fully funded status. So I wanted to point that out as well. And then if we continue on, we can touch on the pension portion. This is invested in the moderate strategy as well in the OPEB, or excuse me, similar to the OPEB. The October data here at the bottom, we can see the initial contribution of 400,000, additional 1.2 for total contributions of 1.6. Now there was a disbursement taken out of the 1.6 million with the net earnings of 536,000. So the remainder account balance, one key takeaway is that earnings that the district has received on the on the contributions into this program. So you can see just how effective putting those funds aside year over year has been to the district, and there's still, even with that total contribution reimbursed, you still have assets available in this trust should the district need. Now, if we continue to the next page, you'll see again a similar reflection. We can see that initial contribution, the disbursement taken out, and that remainder balance of that 520,000. At this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Randy, and he can discuss the investments on the program.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate it. So flipping over to the next slide. Thank you. So both pension and OPEB are invested in our moderate high mark plus strategy, which is what we call the active strategy. Moderate refers to one of our 5 different investment objectives. So this is a split between 50% stock and 50% bonds and cash. So an even split, if you will, between protection and stability of assets with bonds and growth of capital and inflation protection on the equity side. So active refers to the type style of investments. We invest in mutual funds that seek to outperform the benchmark rather than our passive style, which uses passively managed ETFs to mimic the benchmark. Over time, you can we have the fact sheets in the back, but that show the difference in returns between the active and passive. And over time, for all of our investment objectives, all of our 5 investment objectives, the active has outperformed passive. So in regards to the allocation, what we do internally at Highmark is what we'll look at the markets and we'll take an opinion on the markets in terms of where we see things headed in the future. And of course, we have no crystal ball, but we do our best. We will over or underweight different asset classes and sub-asset classes, seeking to do a little bit better than the benchmark. So currently, we do expect stocks to continue to do a little better than bonds. We've been right this year. We've been overweight most of this year in terms of stocks, and they vastly outperformed bonds. Currently, we're actually really low in cash because cash is yielding 0%. In terms of our investment objectives and the OPEB and pension in terms of performance historically, as you can see, OPEB's returned 6.8% since inception 9/11, and pension up about almost 9% since September of 18. So we actually, I just want to set expectations here. We actually expect the long-term return for our moderate investment objective to be, at the present time, to be 5.89%. So a little bit less than what you've seen in terms of the historical performance. Just to give context, what we do is we review all of our investment objectives and we generate long-term return assumptions for each of those using industry data and generally industry data, and with a few tweaks on our end. And so that's how we come across our 30-year horizon investment objective return assumptions. So if we go ahead and move to the second page, or next page, I believe 12.
I was just going to mention, I just noticed at the top up here that we are not the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. We're down here. So it's funny that I didn't catch this the first time because we always get their mail, they get our mail. It's quite common that we get mixed up, but obviously they must be using PARS as well. So I just wanted to point out that I just noticed that.
My apologies, Tammy. It was a
No,
back-to-back meeting,
just
so
make sure the
yeah.
money's not getting mixed up. That's all.
No, it does not happen. Just the title name.
Thank
And
you.
by the way, they're adding a couple $100,000 into their
Are they?
OPEBs.
Well, you can shoot it over our way any day. Okay.
So the returns. Thanks for that, and I apologize for the titling mishap there. As far
I just
as
noticed it.
yeah. So to provide a little bit more context in terms of our returns and how they've done against the benchmark, again, we are using actively managed funds that seek to outperform the benchmark. So it's relevant to include the benchmark when you're showing returns. We typically in annual reviews typically focus on the more shorter term time horizon, 3 month and year. So you can see the returns over the last year. First off, the cash and cash equivalents, as I mentioned, 0%. That's expected to be that way probably until either the March or May timeframe when the Fed starts to increase interest rates. At least that's what the market expectation is. So we'll probably stay pretty light on cash until we're starting to see start to generate returns in the cash line. Fixed income, though, down slightly for the year, down slightly year to date. Because interest rates have trended a little bit higher this year, it's put pressure on bond prices, and that's why you saw the decline relative to decline for the year. But one thing is that we've done pretty well against the benchmark. As you can see, we've outperformed. As far as the equities go, year to date up 15%. The 1 year performance up almost 21. So certainly we've been in the we've been positioned right in terms of where we've allocated investments. The large cap funds over the last year time frame approximates the benchmark a little bit less on the year to date time frame. But over time, compared pretty favorably. The mid cap line item, we actually just use a benchmark fund because all the managers that we would normally invest in are closed for new money. So we're continually looking for a quality fund, but at this point in time, we're in the benchmark. Small cap funds, as you can see, haven't done so great. Over time, it has. Since inception, the return is beaten the benchmark, but in recent time period, we've missed the benchmark. And the reason being is that one fund has underperformed. We use two funds, Victory RS Capital, which is the growth fund, and a value fund. But really, the problem has been in the growth fund. We met with that manager this morning and came away that a positive on their prospects. We're retaining the position as of now. And then international is a blend of emerging represented by EAFE index and the developed represented by the EAFE index and the emerging markets like Russia, Brazil, China, EM free index. Performance pretty much in the middle of those two as we own both categories. And then REITs, as you can see, REITs have done pretty well this year as they were the hardest hit during the lockdown. Moving over to page 13, we're all about full disclosure. These are all the investments in the plans. So they're the same investments in both plans, of course, both the moderate investment objectives, so the same mix as well. So what we'll do is we'll tweak up or down these investment mixes based on our longer term views. It's more of a 12 to 18 time horizon, a shorter to medium term time horizons in order to do a little bit better than the benchmark going forward. And then the next slide shows the pension plan. So there's a shorter time horizon, as we've talked about, but because it's in the same investment objective, the same return stream there as in the OPEB. And then we also have the same slide in terms of the investment mix. And then finally, the last slide is each of the funds in the plan and the trailing time period returns of each of those. And just to point out, I mentioned that the small cap manager had underperformed. You can see that in the small cap equity fund category. And you can see Victory RS small cap down 10% on a year to date versus the Russell 2000, which is the small cap benchmark, up 12.3%. So over time, though, as you can see, the performance is above the Russell 2000 benchmark. So we do expect things to recover as their style of small cap growth comes back in favor. So just to recap overall, we're continuing to be a little bit more overweight on the equity side of things, and the reason being is we do think the markets the economy will continue to improve, although with more fits and starts this year relative to fits and starts in 2022 relative to 2021. Reason being, of course, is that we don't have all the stimulus that we did in 2021. We're starting to see the Fed increase interest rates, at least the expectation of that, and as I mentioned, in the March or May timeframe. So that always spooks investors and causes more volatility. But we do think that just in this environment where the economy is improving, things will recover in terms of folks getting back to work. We're still maintaining our overweight position in equities. We do recognize, of course, the Omicron, variant and the problems that could happen. But it seems as of now, not as deadly, and the vaccine's pretty effective against it. So something that it seems like we could continue to work through and allow things to recover in terms of the economy. And that's all for me. Any questions?
Louis, you have your...
Yes, good question. Randy touched on it briefly, and I was going to ask you if you could please maybe go into a little bit of more details as to how the market could be affected by the stimulus and the printing of money and all of that, and you also mentioned about the new variant of the COVID too. But I'm especially interested in knowing how what effect would this stimulus of additional money coming into circulation would do to the market.
So you're exactly right in terms of the stimulus having a big impact in the market, especially in this time frame in which you've had issues with the supply. So you had demand continued recovering really quickly. The stimulus, enabled that demand in a large part, but the recovery on the supply side has lagged. And if it seems when we talk to companies and we listen to companies, it seems primarily a lot of it has to do with on the labor side. So I think that when you look at the data, the stimulus really helped support folks that were in need, and that was wonderful. It seems like it may have stimulated a little too much in regards to there's been a slower return to work as they built up a lot of cushion, if you will, and a little bit slower return to work. And so you've had this supply constraint problem. And so, the net of that, of course, is that you've got this inflation issue And that's one of the things that's prompting the Fed to really accelerate and move up the timeline in terms of raising interest rates. So that is a factor that the markets are contending with, and so that we're starting to see a little bit more volatility as a result of that. And certainly, it's a little unclear on a lot of on a lot of fronts how that would transpire, or what the outcome of all that would be. And certainly, when you have a variant, and it's certainly a long topic of discussion, or large topic of discussion, is the fact that the variant actually would probably perpetuate inflation, because that would make it more difficult for folks to return to work. Of course, we all know a variety of reasons for that. As well, at the same time, potentially the demand side continues. But I think that these are more shorter term issues. When we look at history, and we don't have a lot of history with regards to the variants and the impacts on how that would, how they transpire. But looking at the data, it would seem that we get a spike in terms of this new variant, and it pretty much peaks in the January timeframe. But that things will recover from there, and the supply side come back and really start to ease the inflation concerns. And I think near-term inflation concerns probably remain elevated, and it's probably safe to say that hey, we got some inflation near term. But the bond market, which is really spot on about inflation long term, is not saying that it's a problem, and I would probably tend to agree with that. Of course, it's always subject to revision, of course.
Of course, but based on the numbers that you are presenting to us and the effect on our investment for the Mid-Peninsula Water District, even when you go to the return, to the 6-month return and to the 1-year return, I mean, the stimulus was there already. This is not the first time that we saw a stimulus. So it did not appear to have had, any negative effects on our investment. Now I'm talking about the Mid-Peninsula Water investment in the year past. It looks like we did, it appears that we did fairly well.
Right. I mean, I think it's been a great time period. We've outperformed our expectations for our longer term returns for this investment objective. And yes, a lot, we could say, and I think it's fair to say, that the stimulus certainly helped the recovery and helped returns in the markets. So I think it's a combination of factors. But yeah, I mean, I think it's been, frankly, as you guys have noted and Jennifer noted, is the decision to fund OPEB over these years has been excellent, because now you're in a great position in terms of funding status. So yeah, it's and in terms of your plans, I think it's I think it's been a great decision.
Right. Yeah, and we are kind of on the conservative side too. So as far as the investments.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Randy.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Brian, you had a question?
Yeah, a couple questions. Going to our page 85, your slide 7. There's a reference to service costs. I assume that's your fees?
No, the service cost is the cost that the district incurs by providing this benefit. That is the cost of the active employee. So if you scroll one page before this, Tammy, currently you have about 19 active employees that may benefit from this service one day. That cost, based on GASB rules or your actuary too, you have to actually account for that cost in the future in the current time, so in the present time. So the cost to offer this benefit to those 19 employees is that service cost that you see on that next page, which is about $89,000 a year for those active employees. So it's not a PARS fee or anything like that. It's the accrued benefit that they're accruing and one day be able to benefit from this retired healthcare obligation.
Is that like an incremental accrued benefit for all the employees for OPEB costs? That's what that means?
If we weren't fully funded, that would be our annual cost, right? We would want to make sure that we're making that contribution into the trust plan if we
Okay.
weren't fully funded, at a minimum, that amount. And that changes based on the actuarial report, which we have to do every 2 years. And so it just depends once they run those numbers, depending on age and new hires and what their benefits might be, then that cost goes up or down.
Okay, great. Moving on then to slide 12 or our page 90. Looking at the large cap funds, and for all this stuff, I really don't care about short-term performance. I look at long-term. But I think you did say that for the large cap funds outperformed over the long term over the composite. But I don't see that looking at the figures. Did I misunderstand what you said?
Yeah, I said, I said a lot of things, but I think I was for large cap, I said it compared favorably, is what I said. I didn't say we outperformed. And I can explain the reason why a little bit more succinctly. The funds, I think, when you look at them together, have performed pretty well against the benchmark. What we can do is over or underweight the value and growth components, the styles, if you will, within large cap. And we were overweight value when it underperformed growth for a period of about 18 months. And that really is the crux of the relative underperformance. And there's also the fund fees in regards in those numbers. While maybe they performed in line on a gross basis, net fees it underperformed. But that's just a side point. The real issue is that we were investing in the value style, which underperformed for about 18 months.
Okay. Okay, and I'll just make my annual note that I am interested in climate divestment issues. Not that it really is something we need to talk about now, but might be interesting to talk about when we do strategic plans in January. And I saw that San Diego recently divested. Like looking up, I couldn't tell if it was their pension fund or something else that they did.
Is that City of San Diego?
Yes.
Okay, cool, thanks. We always like to look up and see what other cities and other agencies are doing, so it's really helpful. We do have, I think we've talked about this before, but we do have investments in-house that are ESG investments or impact investing. They focus on impact investing, so they're funds and ETFs in that realm. So it would be good to see how they're implementing that. Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you.
I don't see anyone else who has a question. So judging from this report, we do have a resolution to look at. And the resolution is to approve retention of the moderate Highmark Plus investment portfolio for the funds. Do we have a motion on the resolution?
Motion to approve resolution 2021-38.
Second, Lewis.
Okay, can we have a roll call vote?
Okay, Director Schmidt,
Yes.
Vice President Vella,
Yes.
Director Zuka,
Yes.
Director Mostasisa,
Yes.
and President Wheeler.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, Will, and Randy, and happy holidays. We appreciate your being here with us tonight.
Yes,
Yes,
thank you,
thank
guys.
you
Happy
all.
holiday.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
So item 8B.
So item 8B, the first part of this is to discuss the president's appointment of advisory committee members for the GM recruitment. And then we'll talk about the executive search team, CPS HR consulting, the work plan, the proposed work plan, and the project schedule. So I'll defer to you, President Wheeler, about the appointment of advisory committee members, if you want to start that discussion.
I guess my thought would be to see whether people have any questions regarding the proposed schedule and activities. So we all have a good understanding of what this subcommittee would be doing. It wasn't clear to me that it was obvious that as you go through this task list, what type of decisions are going to be coming up. I assume that it would be advisory to the consultant as they go through their tasks and not necessarily making a bunch of decisions on an ongoing basis.
Right, so I'm going to turn this to this page and then introduce Andrew Nelson, who is the project manager with CPS HR Consulting. And, I asked that they provide highlights and then just highlight the areas where there would be a decision by the board, a discussion this evening, whether you wanted this to remain an ad hoc committee. And they actually placed here in yellow highlight where, based on their experience, these types of activities have happened. And then whether it was open or closed session, I knew that that was feedback that we received from the board when this was discussed a couple of months ago. So Andrew, welcome tonight. I appreciate that, your colleague Pam was here in the beginning while you tended to your sick young one, and we appreciate your being here. So I'm going to turn on this page and just let you give the overview and highlight of your work plan that you guys created.
Certainly. Thank you, Tammy. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
So as Tammy stated, I tried to put together a work plan that would be easily digestible for you and really highlight the sections or the board participation that we would need to make decisions. And those highlighted sections are in yellow. Those are decision points for your consideration where it's really critical to have your input. So we're anticipating a kickoff after the start of the new year with myself, my colleague, Joanna, and whatever subcommittee members the board would like to include. We would review the position, review the current situation at the district, get your feedback for what you're looking for in a new general manager. And then we could also branch out and talk to other stakeholders, including staff and other members of the board separately offline to round out that picture that helps us put together our recruitment brochure. That's the second item on the list. There is the recruitment brochure. We'll summarize all of your feedback, put that into a well-designed online brochure. We call it a flip book. So it's mobile optimized and web optimized. It's like you're turning a page on your phone or turning a page with your mouse. Saves a lot of money in terms of mailing out advertisements, which is rarely done anymore. We placed the ads. You see that on January 14th and 17th. We put together the marketing materials and ads for the recruitment. And then that's when we really get to the meat of the matter, starting on January 18th when we do our aggressive recruiting process. We would anticipate leaving that open for approximately 1 month. Any questions up until that point?
I'm sorry, I had one question, which was who actually makes a decision or the final say on the recruitment brochure? Is that you guys propose something and Tammy and the ad hoc committee, or is it going to go all the way back to the board and they can comment on it?
Typically with an ad hoc committee, we would steer that through them for final approval and not go to the full board. That helps streamline the process and make decisions more quickly.
Okay.
We could take it to the full board, but that would add time. And then that's fine. We can do that as well. What I would probably do in that situation is send the text of the brochure to the entire board to get your feedback first before we go to design. And that way we make sure that the content is accurate.
Louis, you had a question?
Yes, I just have an observation. We do have a strategic plan review meeting where the whole group will get together right in between this. So I think we have a very good opportunity for the entire board to actually participate more without adding more time. I mean, it looks like pretty aggressive, you know, from January 5th to January 14th, and then you go active probably the start of the following week. But on January 13th, the board is actually going to meet anyway. So it kind of, I don't know, it kind of makes sense that maybe the full board can take a quick look at it. Tammy, I don't know, help me out here. But
Yeah,
I was
no.
looking at the dates, I go like, holy mackerel, this is a beautiful coincidence here, right here, you know, just staring us in the face.
And Andrew was prepared for this because I said, you know, hey, look, they're going to make decisions about what tasks they want to handle as a full board and be receptive and open to that, which he was, and then what tasks they want the full committee. So Andrew, there's a special meeting on January 13th. That's where the board will be reviewing their strategic plan because their regular board meeting is on January 27th. So it's a good idea. If the rest of the board wants to do that, then the draft brochure or the language of it could be presented and you know, reviewed in advance by the board, so that, you know, you could see that and Andrew can share it.
Exactly. And Andrew, I mean, it's not like, you know, I wanted to kind of buy more time, but we don't hire general managers every week usually, you know. This is a big thing for us. So
we built some time in here, so.
Yeah, that's really no problem. In fact, the reason why it's so aggressive is because you see that timeline from January 5th to January 12th. Depending on the number of conversations you would like me to have with relevant stakeholders, that could really push out that timeline anyway. For example, I'm currently doing multiple recruitments for the city of San Diego, and I'm talking with every member of their city council and every member of their senior staff. It takes a significant amount of time to process all of that information and put it into a written format.
Understood. And I was actually trying to work around the schedule that you presented to us, you know, without burdening it too much, you know. So
yeah, January 13th is no problem.
You'll be seeing this schedule probably every month, so that you'll see that, you know, things might be modified or extended, you know, due to what the activity is. And that's the reason why we know that we built enough time with that at the very bottom, that, you know, hire date, that start date of July 1. So there is time built in there for those potentials for extensions or additional discussions.
So I can modify that schedule to reflect that January 13th meeting. I think that's an excellent opportunity. Everything will shift a little bit after that, but that's no problem. The January 18th or thereabouts, I'll say, we will start the aggressive recruitment for approximately 1 month. At that point, the board members can really sit back, and that's where I'm really driving the bus at that point, trying to get you as many candidates as we can and as competitive a pool as we can. The next time that you would see me is earlier in the spring. If you can scroll down a little bit. After we close, whatever those dates are, we will do phone screenings with your top candidates. Those typically take about 30 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes. And we dive into issues that you have identified in those early conversations. So those ideal candidate characteristics that you're looking for, what, you know, the wish list that you want for your general manager, those are the questions I'm going to be asking in those screening interviews. And the next time I would need to meet with any board members is approximately March 9th, where we would review those candidates with that ad hoc committee or the full board, depending on how you'd like to play that. That meeting typically takes anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes. I would provide you either a hard copy or a digital copy of all of the, I'll say, quarterfinal candidates. You won't see everybody unless you request it. But typically when at this level of a recruitment, we only want you to have to sift through the information for those most relevant candidates that you're actually going to consider. So that meeting, again, 60 to 90 minutes, I would present the candidates to you. We can ask as many questions as you'd like, get clarification. And the goal of that meeting is to take my quarterfinal list and narrow it down to a semifinal list of perhaps 4 to 8 candidates that you would like to interview. Questions on that phase? That's generally considered phase 2 of our scope of work.
But what you're calling the quarterfinals might be a dozen plus or minus type of number of resumes.
Yeah, typically anywhere between 12 and 20 individuals.
Right. Okay.
After the client review, candidate review meeting, we will have a slate of candidates for you to interview. And with an ad hoc committee is usually the best way to go with this. We can do full board, but it makes the most sense because it's going to be a full day typically, or 2 full evenings of interviews. Let's say we have 6 candidates. Each candidate gets anywhere between 40 to 50 minutes worth of time for an interview. General standard practice in our COVID world is to do this particular interview online, just like we are now. And then that ad hoc committee would whittle that field from, let's say, 6 to 3. So we move from the semifinal round to the final round of 3 candidates. And that I would anticipate with the full board. Generally, it's been about 50-50, especially in the Bay Area, about whether that's an in-person or a virtual interview for that final interview. Some folks really want to meet them in person. Others have been completely fine making a hire based off of the virtual interviews. So that would take us to the point of making a selection, a semifinal interview online and a final interview online or in person. Questions at that stage?
See, Matt, you had a question?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of applies to the quarter and semis and the different whittling down phases. Is there a process whereby you can make available to the entire board the complete list and then the recommended short list, if you will, at each phase, or the shorter list of each phase? And the reason I ask is I don't know how I feel about the ad hoc committee making decisions on candidates unless it's just, I mean, there's completely obvious, and then there's decisions that are maybe preference, right? So I would say that the spirit in which the ad hoc committee goes about whittling down that initial list is important to me. In other words, the criteria that they use would be one of, like, I'll just toss it out there. They are whittling out unqualified candidates, not their preference about qualified candidates or potentially qualified candidates. To me, it feels like as soon as we start getting to the point of deciding between qualified or potentially qualified candidates, that needs to start getting escalated. But or at least we need to have visibility into the ones that are being screened out and not included on the preferred list. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on how you've managed that in the past, or if you have, I don't know, or if it's ever done.
I'd say it's certainly a minority, maybe 10 to 15% of the time we get a request to see all of the candidates. If we could scroll back just a tad, maybe a quarter of a page. So you see there, March 4th, the screening interviews, that's the first cutoff point, and that cutoff is entirely on me.
Right.
So just to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, do you want to see those that I have eliminated through our process?
No, I think that I guess I think that we've retained you to look at the candidates based on a certain criteria, and that's pretty objective. What I'm sort of more concerned about is when we start getting into things that are more subjective, is having that list, be here's the recommendation, and here's it's less the decision being made independently and more the recommendation of a decision. So for example, the first ad hoc committee meets and screens, right? Then when it what concerns me is we go from quarter to semi and it's just ad hoc, and the full board doesn't have the ability to see the decision really that the ad hoc committee made, right? And how do we I don't necessarily, I'm not trying to create work for people, but how do we have visibility into that thought process as opposed to getting a twice screened list at that point before that's the first time the full board sees it?
Yeah, so in that sense, if I'm understanding you right, and I think I am, and based off of including everybody in that first brochure revision, what I'm really hearing is that we should involve the board at every stage. And that's totally fine. That is quite regular. So we can strike the words ad hoc if that's the board's pleasure and include the entire board in that candidate review. At that point, you would see the entire slate of quarterfinalist candidates, and the full board would be involved in that process. The downside to that is it's a greater time investment for you. The upside is you do have that input and that voice at the early stages of the screening.
And then Julie, why don't you talk to us about Brown Act and how that might turn into.
So I had a couple thoughts. One is just, the Brown Act consideration. If we want to have the ad hoc committee not be a Brown Act body, which I think is what you want, because you want to be able to, meet whenever you need to and not have to notice and have public meetings and all of that. Just keep in mind that under your board rules, the president can constitute advisory committees and appoint. So we just want to stay away from the board creating that committee and just leave it up to the president. Obviously, board input is fine, but the actual action to create the committee and staff the committee should be the president. Then we know we have a non-Brown Act committee. Now, because we're in the Zoom world, you can always schedule a special meeting for the whole board. So if the ad hoc committee is doing its thing and whittling down, or even after the initial screening, you can schedule a special meeting, come together, it would be a closed session, and look at these, whoever made the first pass, and then hand things back over to the ad hoc committee to do the interview. So you have a lot of flexibility, with special meetings in Zoom to get a lot of this stuff done pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
And I would
notice when it's a special meeting. So it's easier for your legal team, to comply with the Brown Act in that regard as well.
And the barrier is significantly less to participate in the candidate review than it is to participate in a full day's worth of interviews as board members. So I think that's a very wise course of action.
I mean, I guess here would be my preference, just to sort of cut to the chase, is that, the ad hoc committee can meet with you, whatever, we can come up with a recommendation. And then maybe that thing gets reviewed in a special meeting by the full board, or we decide whether it's appropriate depending upon the number of candidates. At the very least, I guess I would want to have maybe the semifinal be full board and have one round, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable getting to 3 candidates with just the ad hoc committee, I guess, is sort of the bottom line. And at some point, maybe if the ad hoc does the first round on March 9th, the closed session of semifinal, maybe it's a review and the interviews that the semifinal interviews is actually we're interviewing that list. So we're talking to those people. So yeah, I don't know. I'm sort of feeling like before we get to interviews, the board ought to see a packet of information that we can then evaluate. This is my first 1 out of 5 opinion, that we can then evaluate and say, yes, I agree, or no, I don't agree with the decisions made on the list. I'm not sure how quite that's affected, but rather than it being done, I sort of feel it's all of our obligation to make sure we get this right. And so anyway, I'll leave it at that.
I can envision a potential process where if these are closed session video conferencing, if we record it and all of the documentation is available, then the board members who are not on the video would have an opportunity to see the discussion and see the documentation, whether it's not at the time, it may be after the fact type of thing, to envision whether or not there were people that should have been carried through.
Or it could be just that the entire board gets a packet of information saying, here's all the resumes, here's the ones that were screened through, here's the ones that were rejected, you know, and it's just a review of the, you know, it could be the application, the resume, the whatever was used, you know, and then we can look at that and go, well, wait a second, why wasn't this person brought there? This person's a genius. I don't know. And we'd have the opportunity to have that conversation, and we would know whether we're comfortable with the screening process before we get to the interviews. I mean, believe me, I've sat in on enough all-day Zoom interview panels, being in the public sector now, that I have no desire to do that any more than I absolutely have to. It's awful. But with that being said, yeah, it's just one of those things where it could be that the ad hoc committee goes through, meets on March 9th, does the screening, and the results of that are then presented to the full board as sort of a distribution of information. And then we know who's sort of above the fold, below the fold, and then making it onto the next round. And we have then an opportunity to sort of, I don't know, I'm going to call it protest for lack of a better word. I can't think of anything better, opine on whether or not we think there could have been a slightly different selection process. But if no one else wants it, they're interested in it, then, you know, that's fine. I said I'd toss it out there.
I think Director Zuka would be perfect on the ad hoc.
It can't be ad hoc if we vote on it as a board, Louis. That's the whole point.
No, because if you're on the ad hoc, then the whole board may not have to be involved until the end. We'll get it over and done with. So since I have the mic on through President, if I may.
Sure.
Yeah. Andrew, quick one. How rigid, no, let me rephrase that. How flexible is this schedule that you have here? And let me qualify that comment first before you answer. I come from a world where, you know, there's bidding for the fire station where you're going to be working, and you know the calendar ahead of time, at least a year ahead. So you'll have, you know, the meetings that we have here, the vacations. Easter is coming in around, where are we here? Around the 8th, somewhere in April, I think, you know, there'll be some Easter vacation, stuff like that, you know. So how easy would it be to just push the dates forward or backwards, you know, with this? You decide that, we decide that, or how do we do that?
These dates are entirely flexible. To answer your question directly, we can manipulate these at any stage of the process and modify our next steps accordingly.
All right. Okay, good.
Kathy, did you have a question or a comment?
I think I have just a few comments. So I think the reason why we're suggesting an ad hoc committee, having done hiring of school district superintendents and whatnot, is it creates scheduling conflicts if we all 5 want to be involved. But that being said, I do feel like I agree with Director Zuka that if we can find some kind of happy medium where we review the full packet, and then, you know, if we have questions on people that were eliminated, we can always revisit that. And but I would also be supportive of if we looked at our calendars as we kind of got closer to the semifinal interviews be full board as well as the final interviews. I think it's probably one of the most important hires that we're responsible for. So I think that it'd be important for all of us to be able to have some input.
Brian, you had a comment?
Yeah, I'm okay with the full board being involved at all steps if that's what the board wants to do. I'm trying to figure out what might also accommodate what Matt is suggesting. It sounded to me what might work is for this schedule at the March 9th closed session ad hoc committee to move forward. They make suggestions, and then what I was thinking is schedule a special meeting of the board to review those suggestions and decide who's gonna move on to semi-final interviews. And I suppose that could be all of us, or maybe we could decide now that goes back to ad hoc because the full board will have had a level of say to select down to there. So that's one way it occurs to me might be able to handle it.
What I would suggest, because ultimately what that's going to end up doing is doing the same meeting twice. In all reality, the ad hoc committee will review it, and then at another meeting with the full board, we're going to essentially do the same meeting. So I think to make sure we have full board participation and buy-in would be to, on that March 9th date, whenever that actually is, make that a special meeting of the board to review the entire slate of candidates.
Yeah, if I might, I mean, to me, that feels right. And it can be hopefully quick. We review them in advance. Maybe they can be pre-sorted by you, Andrew, in terms of your sort of professional opinion and however you go about your magic sorting process, right? And then we can take a look at that and sort of apply our own independent judgment. But rather than it coming in random and we do a sort, you might be able to go through it and say, hey, you know, I've done a bunch of these from a GM standpoint. Here's how I kind of rank them. And we get that. And then we can kind of look at it from there and then say, okay, here's how we see our, you know, our own individual opinions and biases applied to the selection process and have a, hopefully it would be a short meeting. So I don't know if that would work for you.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. So that report that on that March 9th date, that report it'll probably be 150 pages, and most of that is resumes, cover letters, references, etc., for you to sift through. We try and make that easy for you by grouping the candidates into 2 groups, group 1 and group 2, sometimes a group 3 if necessary, but group 1 are the ones that I would recommend are your strongest candidates, most qualified, best fit. Group 2 typically means that they are otherwise qualified, but may not have all of the factors that you're looking for that were determined in our early stakeholder outreach phases. And then group 3 would be others that would be just a lower priority in my professional estimation. So to your point, can that be quick? Yes, usually 60 minutes we can knock that meeting out and get good consensus moving forward.
Yeah, but Andrew, we would have the material ahead of time, correct? Ahead of the
Correct.
meeting. Okay.
Usually about 3 to 4 days ahead of time.
Correct. Okay. So we won't be seeing it the first time at the meeting. We should be coming in kind of somewhat prepared. Yeah. All right.
Okay. I guess what I would like to do is set up the ad hoc committee, which will help Andrew with the initial phases and what goes into the drafts as they go forward so that we can answer questions a little more efficiently than having to go to the full board for anything during the course of the process. Just based on time, I think I have the most free time since I'm not actually working. I'm retired. And so I put myself on the committee. I'd like to get either Louis or Matt involved because you have more experience associated with hiring a general manager for the district.
I'm going to say the only between the two of us, the only one of us that's retired is Louis, if we're using that criterion.
Well, that was my criteria. It doesn't mean that that has to be the criteria for you.
I thought I volunteered for the finance committee recently.
I'm
but
good. I just thought I'd toss it back out there. I'm happy to be
I
on
saw I saw that smirk in your face. I saw it.
We've only been on the board for 15 years, but yeah. But anyway, we don't have to decide now. But if we're going to keep it ad hoc, I'm happy to be on it.
Excellent. I think Matt will be a good choice
Good.
to work with Kirk.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Then, subject to future revision, I will establish a ad hoc committee to support the process going forward, which would include myself and Matt.
And then I'll work with Andrew to get the updates based on the feedback tonight. And then that way we can share that with the board, remembering that it's a living document. We have plenty of time because you've been committed to some overlap with the GM and my retirement. So we'll work on that. And then that way you can have that, you know, at the January 13th meeting, and you'll always have that in front of you, recognizing that there's flexibility built in and that those target dates, when every month we meet, then you can have that updated schedule. I think we have good enough direction tonight though, Andrew, right? I mean, it was pretty clear.
Correct, yes. And I'll modify those dates and get that back to you, Tammy, for review.
Okay.
And then if you wouldn't mind coordinating with the ad hoc committee on a date that actually works calendar-wise.
I certainly will do that. And Julie, was there anything else you wanted to add about this item?
Nope, covered what I wanted to cover.
Okay, thank you. That's all board on this item, unless there's any other questions.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. Nice to see you in person.
Okay. Item 8C, receive status report on organizational staffing and succession planning.
So I wanted to just bring back to the board, since it's been a couple of years, well, not a couple, I guess it's been just a little more than a year, the highlights of what's gone on since we last met compared to our current org chart and looking at future retirements. So I just summarized here about the new hires that we have on board, and most of the ones that we're getting are OITs, or they're maintenance techs per our classification description. We've actually brought one on and one resigned within a couple of months to take another job with a water supplier here in the Bay Area. We just had a recent retirement with the administrative services manager. So right now, the employee retirements are occurring as expected, and actually a couple of them have happened earlier. Okay, so we also, make mention again that we certainly weren't expecting Robbie's death last December. He was a long-term water system operator, so it kind of threw us in this kind of loop of, we need some really experienced operations folks, and they've got a good training program going on in operations to get these people up to speed. So, and the challenge with hiring is ensuring that we can find locals, right? So we were fortunate with the CalOps ad and a jobs available ad that the CalOps seemed to be a little more fruitful to find local candidates, but we're not getting certified operators. We're getting folks who have good mechanical backgrounds, or they've got some good construction experience in pipeline. And so that's been our experience, and that's who we've been fortunate enough to bring on board. But there is, the necessary training and then the necessary studying and preparation for the D2 tests, and we recommend the T1 so that they're familiar with the treatment processes. So I want to just run through the organizational charts because next month I'll be bringing to you a proposed reorg in advance of the next round of retirements. Okay, so this is what the org chart looks like now. Let me push this down a little bit. And you'll see here there's 20 and a half of us, and there was a succession plan position right here. Previously, the board had given us, I think we were up to 23 positions, but retirements didn't happen as quickly. And then boom, all of a sudden we got JT out, Bizio out, and then Burwell out, within a short time frame. So we have one vacancy in this lead operator position. And then we've got the succession planning position, or so this was, and this is the way it looked. I'm just dating it for today's board meeting. And then this chart shows the positions who are eligible for retirement, okay? Meaning based not on age only, but CalPERS requires that you be at least 50 and that you have at least 5 years in the system, okay? Most of these people have far more than that. So these positions are the ones I like to show the first chart as who's eligible. And then the second chart shows the combination of the red means I know for a fact that these people are retiring, and I put 5 years, but they're going to be retired by 2023. So when you start at the top, my date is March 31st of 2023. I know this position is the very next month after me, so April of 2023. We still haven't got an exact date out of this guy, but it's coming. This one is, if he's not next fall, he's going to be very early in 2023. And then this person is retiring next year, okay? So we know for a fact all these reds really are gonna be out within 18 months instead of 5 years. It's just that I tried to be consistent with these charts because you've seen them before, all except Director Mostacisa. And then I just like to show the board for succession planning who will be eligible, or who, I don't even do eligibility, who is projected to retire within 10 years. And the reason I like doing this is not just for you all, it's for us internally, because I like to, when I meet with the bargaining unit, I like to share with them, I like to meet and confer and say, I want you to see the impacts and how it's important and why it's important that we're training our replacements, okay? So you'll see the 2 supervisors will more than likely be retired within 10 years. Another really long-term water system operator and a long-term maintenance tech will be retired within 10 years. And then we'll have the second admin assistant likely out. So by that 10-year period, there will be more new employees, and there will be the long-term folks who have been here much longer than me. I mean, I'm almost at 10 years, believe it or not. And some of these folks, 20, 25, Brent is, approaching 30 years. So I just wanted to update the board and let you know that we continue to find good people. In January, when I come back to you with the reorg, we have a few positions like these red ones that I would like to staff up for. I'd like to go ahead and bring in the replacement position for this one that's retiring in May. We have a candidate that we're going to interview right after the beginning of the year that has some really good experience that applied for the WSO position. And we were like, wait, well, let's see if they might be interested in this position. And then we've got another candidate that might fill in for this one and this one. So I will be proposing that we staff up and then go back down when these people retire, back down to this 20 and a half. So I just want you to know it's an evolving process, and with it comes the change, which is a communication we had as a staff yesterday, that none of us can pinpoint exactly, even I as the leader of the organization, who or when people are going to retire. There's different reasons why people retire. And so I don't want, nobody ever feels like this process is pushing anyone out, but they understand it's a business practice and that we've got to be prepared. And that's the reason why I like to deliver the report, just so you see that, you know, we're putting plans in place and we're keeping an eye on the future, so that there is this ongoingness of the organization that I like to preach about internally. And there's the, you know, the continued training and the continued mentoring for the folks who are nearing their retirement and the next phase of their life. So with that, if there's any questions or comments, I'm happy to respond to them as best I can.
Lewis?
Yes, thank you, Tammy. Tammy, could you scroll down a little bit? I just want to make sure that,
Oh.
yeah, one more.
That's the next report. So you want to go up one?
Yeah.
This is the one that's eligible for retirement now.
Now I want to go to page 112 on our packet.
Okay.
There you go. Okay. On the top, you said yeah, 5 more employees are projected to retire between early next year and by the end of 2023. What's early next year? Is that early 2022, which means
May.
the next?
It'll be May 1st of 2022.
Really?
Most of these
Okay.
employees, I help them with they ask and I assist them with their retirement packaging. So this employee tried to do it early. And she said, did you know PERS won't let me do the application? I said, yes, I do. So she's very eager. So yes, May 1st of next year. Yes.
Okay, very good. And the other question that I had is on the org chart, where you have the 2 operations supervisors position. When these 2 people are on duty at the same time, what are they responsible for? It's like, is it one like operations and the other one is
Rena?
pumping, or what?
Yeah, Rena, why don't you take that one? Rena, we can't hear you. I mean, if you're talking, we can't see you.
His mic is on.
It is on. Oh, there you are. Oh,
There
we
he
still
is.
can't hear you. Did your mic change back over to your computer? Yeah. Still can't hear you. Still can't hear you. He had issues earlier at a couple of meetings, so he may be needing a new mic or new headset. We have so darn many meetings. Nope, can't hear you. Maybe turn it off and go on your okay, so I can basically start out and you know, the way they're divided.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Oh, there you go. Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I know
Can you
they
hear me?
probably will cover for each other. Yeah, we can hear you, Rena.
We can hear you, Rena.
Cover
Go
for
ahead.
each other, but when they
Sorry about that. Yeah.
That's okay.
So one of the operations supervisors is responsible for the field operations, the activities out in the field. Okay, and that's Michael Anderson. He's responsible for, you know, repairing fire hydrants, any water main ruptures. He's actually helping with some of the capital construction projects, kind of like a liaison if we want somebody to go out there. And then the other operations supervisor, Brent, he's oversees the water quality stuff, whether it's drinking water samples, the backflow, make sure they're all tested. He also spends a lot of time right now with the developers because we've got a lot of development activity. So they kind of split, but they both overlap too. So if one of them's out on vacation or something like that, they cover for each other. I mean, both of these men have well over 20 years of service with the district, and they know the district very well, and they know our customers very well.
Correct. So yeah, I know that Brent will probably be able to supervise a crew out there. Does Michael do plan checking and review of projects as well?
When we have a capital project that's getting ready to go out to bid, we all sit down and take a look at the plans. So they both have that kind of capability, but typically, Brent is the kind of guy that you can't get him to leave the district office. So he typically is the one that takes a look at the development plans. But if Brent wasn't around, Michael could do it. Yeah, they both can do either one's job. I have full confidence in them both.
Very good. Thank you.
I don't see any other questions or comments. So this subject's going to come back to us in a few months? Or?
It will next month. I'll be bringing back a
Okay.
reorg as long as I can get everything accomplished. Sorry, one of my plants, I overwatered it and it was leaking all over. I guess earlier I didn't notice I had a big puddle of water on my desk here. Yes, next month. That's the plan at the regular board meeting, and bring that in and help explain, you know, for the future what we're trying to do. And I just wanted to add on to what Rena said about the 2 operations supervisors. They also have as their performance objectives how and what the plan is going to be to train for their replacements, and how are they working to try to teach folks to do some of those higher level jobs, just so that they each get that opportunity and some other people can look for some advancement opportunities. So yes, you'll see and hear from me again next month at the regular meeting.
Okay, moving on to 8D, meeting schedule.
So this is an easy one. It keeps in line with how you've met in the past. 4th Thursday every month except November, December. Not having a meeting in August, or at least per se this schedule. And then we're keeping with the 3rd Wednesday in November to work around the Bosca meeting for Vice President Vela. And then the 3rd Thursday to work around these holidays for December. And it's just a simple yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down, and then we'll get it posted.
Anyone have any questions or comments? Then I think we're happy.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Let's see, 8E, receive reports, regional water system and drought conditions.
Yeah, that's me. So Tammy, let's go down and take a look at that line graph on the next page. So just to give the board an idea of where we're at in terms of water use. So you'll see up on top, I put down that in November 2021, our customers' water use was down 17.5% when compared to November 2020. You know, if you remember what the governor said, that he was hoping that we could all reduce voluntarily by 15%. Our customers are getting it. And we continue to try and seek ways to conduct outreach to them to continue that message. And we've made some improvements to our website. Tammy might talk about that in her general manager's comments. But anyways, our customers are getting it. Down below in yellow, you can see that our per capita at the residential customer base was 50.2 gallons per person per day during the month of November. That's pretty doggone good. And so, you know, I suspect that in December, we're going to probably have one of the lowest volumes of water delivered for December that we've ever had. I suspect it's probably going to be 70,000 units or less. So again, I think our customers will get it. Go on to the next page, not that one. Let's go to the reservoir status. Tammy, the next one. So just the reservoir updates. This is looking, you know, major reservoirs around California on December 1st. So it doesn't reflect any of the water that has been hitting the reservoirs with this current storm that's been in there. But again, what's significant here is that the red line going across each of those reservoirs is indicating where that reservoir typically is at this time of the year in it. And then the blue bar inside is where it's at now. So you can see how the drought has affected the storage in most of the major reservoirs in California. So we're all hoping and keeping our fingers crossed that we continue to get some of these storms and the snowpack in the Sierras and in Northern California keep building up, and we can fill these reservoirs for next year. Next slide, the drought monitor. So California's drought monitor, you can see that the really dark portions, the exceptional drought, it has reduced in size. Where it was 3 months ago, where roughly almost 50% of the state was in an exceptional drought. At this point, it's dropped, if you want to call it that, or reduced in size by over 20%. Though an extreme drought still covers the vast majority of the state. We're still at over 80% of the states considered to be in extreme drought condition. Again, hoping that the storms and the snow packs are going to help provide some relief. We've been hearing that at the beginning of calendar year 2022, sometime early, the governor's office or the state may be issuing some mandatory water conservation measures. And it's because, again, the drought hasn't gone away and we haven't done that great a job overall as a state in terms of reducing our water consumption. Next slide, Tammy. Just kind of showing nationwide what it looks like. And so you can see, again, west of the Mississippi, there's just different stages of drought that are affecting us. And then if you look east of the Mississippi, the drought really not affecting that part of the country. Next slide. This is from Steve Ritchie, the Assistant General Manager for the water system, regional water system, just providing some precipitation information from their upcountry stations, they call them. And again, you can see the October rain event. In November, we didn't have much rain. It's actually less than what is normal for November. We had just a little under an inch of rain up country. And it'll be interesting to see when he provides this report next month what December looked like. I would imagine that we're probably going to exceed December's number, but we'll see. Next slide, the Bay Area Precipitation Index. Again, you can see October is very healthy rain in the Bay Area. November, about half of what it normally is. And we'll see what December's precipitation index looks like. Let's go down to the next slide, Tammy. This one, you've seen this, and so this is basically showing what the water that's available to the Tuolumne River that makes its way into the regional water system. It hit a high of 81,000 acre feet, and I was listening to Steve Ritchie at the recent regional water managers meeting, and some of you may know this, but anyways, what's interesting about this number is that we don't start seeing any water being made available on the Tuolumne River depending on the time of the year and the flow rate in there. So I think one of the low flow rate numbers in the Tuolumne River is 2,500 CFS, and it depends on the time of the year that it has to hit that volume of water going down the Tuolumne River before water is released or made available to the city. And then I think it's in the summer months, maybe June, July, August type thing, that flow rate in the Tuolumne has to exceed 4,500 CFS before any water is made available to the city. So what happened in November is that rain event caused the Tuolumne River to probably flow a lot more than it might normally. And so the regional water system was the beneficiary to the tune of about 81,000 acre feet. And it's just kind of held there. It really hasn't changed much. I suspect that we might see that number go up maybe in December, unless it's all packed up in snow. The next slide is just the total deliveries for the regional water system. And so the green line is just showing what's taking place here now. And you can see the precipitous drop at the end of October and through the month of November. And that's even kind of reflected in, again, what we're seeing in our own customer base, that 17.5% drop in November, but we also saw a 16% drop in October. Next slide, Tammy. The SFPUC did declare on November 23rd a water shortage emergency, but it's a voluntary 10% reduction, and they're setting the target of 177 million gallons per day. So they're not planning on going to mandatory, and I would suspect unless the state of California issues and directs something differently. But what that means is that they're looking at going into the tier 2 allocation splits, and that's where you see the wholesale would get 64% and the retail, which is San Francisco and the county, 36%. And actually, just even today, we received an email from SFPUC just kind of saying what they are looking for as a target allocation for the Mid-Peninsula Water District in 2022, and it was something like 1.144 million units of water. And so they're trying to set a target that's going to meet this voluntary 10% water reduction. And as you can see here, there's potential rate actions. They're not sure what that's going to look like yet, but they're working on it, and they suspect that they'll have some more information to share with the wholesale customers in spring of 2022. And I think Tammy's mentioned this, that again, through Boston, the water managers, we know that the fund for the wholesale customers has a positive surplus. That was in excess of $60 million, Tammy?
Yeah, it's closer to 80 million.
Okay, that could be used to help potentially offset any kind of rate impacts that SFPUC may be looking to pass on to the wholesale customers. But you know, we are in a state of water shortage and an emergency declared by the SFPUC. Next slide, Tammy. And again, for Mr. Ritchie's presentation, you can see just the start of the fiscal year from July 1 through November, just kind of comparing what's taken place in terms of reduction. So you can see the San Francisco customers, they've been able to reduce their water consumption by 15.5%, and the wholesale customers 9%. I was looking at ours, and during that period of time, July through November, we actually here in the Mid-Peninsula Water District, we actually were a little bit better than the wholesale customers. Our overall reduction was 11.6%. Next slide, Tammy. Again, Mr. Ritchie's presentation. So he ended his presentation by saying, hey, the drought still persists. The state's curtailment orders on the Tuolumne River, and with some ability for them to manage their storage and use the water stored in Dom Pedro and so on. But there's just still a lot of uncertainty. The severity of the conditions of the drought made the SFPUC, declare a water shortage emergency. But they think that we can achieve our reductions without too many, I guess, painful choices. And again, still voluntary, and we'll just have to wait and see if the state is going to create a mandatory water conservation, something for us all to achieve. And then they're hoping that to try and achieve revenue stability, that there won't be some sort of drought surcharge. But we're hoping that, again, if they do, we'll be able to dig into our reserves. And then I just threw in a story that was in the Daily Journal, just talking about the state considering some restrictions, and it really just talked about some water conservation measures that we can all do around our home and around our business. There wasn't anything new there. There wasn't anything saying what the governor or the state is contemplating doing, but just reminding us that the drought's still here, even though we had a nice healthy rain event in October, and we're seeing one, even currently now. So that's what I wanted to share with the board, and we'll continue to provide updates, and hopefully the water situation continues to improve.
Anyone have questions? Brian.
Yes, two questions on a much more micro scale than this presentation, which was really helpful. Since I haven't been to all our properties and all our tanks, I wanted just to know that I'm assuming we do not have any lawns on any of our properties. Is that correct?
I can't think of any place that we have any lawns. I mean, the only place I can think of, is like maybe the Folger property, but even that, there's no lawn there.
I mean, we had some establishment at Buckland, to get some native plants going, but we don't have irrigation and grass. We don't have grass.
Yeah.
Turf.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't think of any.
Great. And then the other slightly larger scale is has there been outreach to the city for areas where it owns lawns about trying to do some lawn replacement?
It's been a while, and they are one of our larger customers. I know that they're not approving any more, lawns on themselves. And again, probably one of the largest sites where they were using water was the ball fields across 101, and they replaced that with turf a couple of years ago. So that had a large impact. I'm trying to think of places. They might have some parks where there might be some lawns, and I'm not
Twin
aware.
Pines Park, there's grass at Twin Pines Park.
Yeah, I can recall Jeanette had talked to them maybe a couple of years ago, but I don't think that we've done anything specific with them with regards to lawns. They're aware of our rebates, but I'm not aware that they've requested any information and or are seeking any sort of rebates that might reduce any of their lawn area.
Okay, it seems like it might be, we did get a good sized lawn replacement. When was that, a month ago, maybe 2 months ago?
Exactly.
Seems like it might be an opportunity to do more.
Mhm.
Just throw that out there.
We'll share that with Jeanette.
Okay, thanks, that's all I had.
I don't see any other questions. Tammy, I had a question. The California Way of Life legislation, have we done anything with that? I know you were monitoring it. Maybe we could have a discussion about it at the strategic plan meeting or something like that going forward.
Okay. Yeah,
Just to
let us.
see what difference that's going to make to us going forward.
No, that's a great point, because while I was at Aqua, and you'll see that down in my report, I know the Bosco report is next, but I think I even commented on that, because while I was attending the Aqua conference, here comes the the DWR and the State Water Board with their indoor standards, which right now are 55 gallons per day by 2023. I mean, Rena just showed you for November, we were at 50, but that's not a norm for us. We're usually up in the 70s and 80s because of the yards and the lawns. But then you'll see that the expectation for the California Conservation Way of Life is to decline by 47 GPCD by 2025. So that's just 2 years after the 2023. And then the standard is to get to 42 GPCD by 2030. So it'll be good to show you that chart that we sent out in the Urban Water Management Plan that shows that California Conservation Way of Life projected schedule, and that quite frankly, they're running on target, surprisingly, with these indoor residential expectations. And now at the same time at Aqua, they talked about the fact that they're working and they have them out for public review, the outdoor ones. So that is moving right along, and we'll be happy. Rena can talk to Jeanette, and we can be happy to report on more and kind of show it where it is on that schedule.
Sounds good. Thank you. Moving on to 8F, Bosca update.
Very good. That's me. Thank you. Yes, the Bosca meeting was held on Thursday, November 18th. That was the last meeting we had. And I'm going to try to navigate around this so that I don't repeat some of the things that Rena talked about, because usually we have the presentation from Mr. Ritchie from SFPUC, and then he'll do the same thing to the water managers as well. At the meeting, we again adopted a resolution to continue to meet via teleconference virtually. It'll probably keep on going till at least the end of March, as far as the Bosca meeting. The next meeting will be in January, and then again in March, and those will probably be virtual again. We'll see what's going to happen, in the beginning, the first 2 months of the year, as far as these COVID regulations. Then we had the presentation. The budget was already adopted, and we had a status report on the budget, and also an audit report, which were approved. And then we had like an opening remarks from Mr. Dennis Herrera. Dennis Herrera is the new San Francisco PUC general manager, and this was his first meeting. And as you probably know, Dennis Herrera is a seasoned San Francisco politician, and he was appointed by the mayor to run the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. And then after that, we had the presentation from Mr. Ritchie that Rena talked in details about. And the few things that I wanted to mention, in addition to what Renee said, was that as of November, The regional water system that means the storage that we have throughout the entire system. You know, all the reservoirs and the storage areas and all that is about 73.2% of what it should be of the total storage, 73.2%. So it is low. However, there is a lot of storage to go through this drought, but it is a lot lower than it should be at this time of year. We'll see what the numbers will be like after the recent storms that we had earlier this week, and it looks like that next week there's forecasted, you know, some more rain coming in. And the most important thing, obviously, is the snowfalls in the upcountry, because that's where the reserve is. And then, well, obviously, we are in a statewide drought with precipitation in the Tuolumne River watershed and the Bay Area well below the historical averages. This is, again, as of November 18th. As we heard, the government asked for a 15% voluntary water use reduction compared to 2020, but on November 23rd, the commission stayed with the voluntary 10% system-wide water use reduction. The San Francisco and the wholesale customers can achieve the proposed water use reduction necessary for water stability. Then, if you recall, I mentioned when I, you know, in my previous meetings with BASCA that I wanted to have a presentation by a representative of the water managers at our meetings. We have many different presentations from this SFPUC, from the Tuolumne River Trust, from environmentalists, from scientists, from you name it. We have presentation by all these people, and I said, why don't we have a presentation from the water managers group? These are the people that are in the trenches. These are the people that know the day-to-day operations, and we got a presentation from them. It has been a while, and as a matter of fact, I added on this request on the performance evaluation of our general manager, and I said, you know what, I want to see this, you know. And thankfully, at the last meeting in November, we did have our first presentation by a member of the water managers group, and that was our own Tammy Rudock, and she did extremely well. She was very well prepared, and she went through the whole gamut of how it affects the smaller district, the larger district, and how they cooperate with each other. And I'm sure she'll say a few things about that, but she made us proud. So good job, Tammy, on the presentation. And I had a lot of very, very favorable comments too from my colleagues there.
Thank you.
And then because of that, now somebody else suggested that we will have a presentation from the water manager representation, and also from the some other groups, you know, that the wastewater. Somebody made a suggestion, why don't we have some presentation from the wastewater managers? And I go like, okay, it looks like we may have opened the floodgates now for other people. But anyway, to conclude, the BASCA board adopted the Tier 2 drought response implementation plan. And as of August 2021, the total potable, this is potable water use, was 22% less than August 2013, which is the year that we always compare with, you know, but it is only about 6% less than August of 2020. So we are doing good, but we could do obviously better. And then, like I said, you know, we will meet again in January. So with that, Tammy, I don't know if you want to add, you know.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Thank you very much that the WMRs there were only a few of us that volunteered to make a presentation to the Bosca board, but it was my pleasure. And, you know, indeed, I just wanted to share that, you know, with everything else that we have going on as agency reps, and the fact that we all have varying differences when we sit around that table, we also have different levels of authority when we come to that room. And then now what I've noticed is the changing faces around the table, right? So there's new people coming in after those of us retire. And I shared that, you know, I was scared stiff 10 years ago when I walked in there because I didn't know anything about this area, but I'm a quick learner and I was interested. And I see that same look on people's faces now in that WMR group. So they have some really good mentors, and, you know, some of us are more outspoken than others, but they all very well know that this board has, you know, made it clear to me that we represent well the ratepayer and we protect them. So that's been my mission since I've been on there. And I just wanted to say the biggest item besides the tier 2 that Lewis just discussed and actually Rena touched on is just to make sure, you know, that we are continuing to stay on top of what those water supply issues are going to be, which, you know, we never know. I mean, Rena mentioned that, you know, next month we could be looking at a mandatory, and I'm just really happy with the level of conservation our customers are making because it's on top of 2020 numbers. Even though we still kind of keep up with that 2013 chart, we're looking, and the governor's request has been on the 2020. So next month, well, actually, I probably have it in February. We're going to be bringing finally the minimum purchase water supply amendments. And some of you will remember several years ago, because this has taken almost 4 years to negotiate amongst us all. And this board gave me direction to make sure there was neutral, no financial impact on this district, which other districts jumped right on the same platform with us with regard to these minimum purchase agencies that want to, because of the drought situation, they don't necessarily need to buy as much water from San Francisco. So this was an extra contract just for Director Mostasisa's benefit outside of the water supply agreement that these cities said, we want to be guaranteed a minimum purchase, okay? And we all had that same obligation and we didn't all do that, but these 4 agencies did. And then as an impact over these years with the drought and their water consumption patterns going down, they don't necessarily need all that water, but they got to buy it because it's a guarantee. And it's hard for them because they either have other supplies or, you know, their funds are drying up with regard to the diminished use. So it took these 3 or 4 years to bargain and finally feel confident that there won't be financial impacts. And there were actually more restrictions to me, but, you know, I think it's a very fair deal. So you're going to be seeing that amended agreement in February. I'll be inviting CEO Sankula to be present just in case there's any technical questions, and so she can talk about just how very long this took and how well we were represented in those discussions as well. So I just want to make sure that, you know, it wasn't that we were dragging our feet. It was just a very complex discussion, and trying to get everybody to ensure that their agencies were protected and that the minimum supply guarantee agencies felt like they got heard. So you'll see that in February. I have that drafted on the February agenda. That packet's going to be distributed before the end of this year. And that was really all besides tier 2 that's already been discussed that I have from the water managers. So thank you again, Lewis. It was my pleasure to be there.
And Tammy, one quick comment, if I may. Maybe you and Rena and your staff could talk a little bit about how we're going to send a message to our customers that, you know, these last days rains, which are godsend, they're a blessing. That doesn't mean that, you know, we let our guards down as far as water conservations. So how you deliver the message, whether you put a banner up or you put it on our website, or how, I leave it up to you, but it looks like something needs to be said, because it always happens when people see the rain, they go like, oh, because there's no problem anymore. And that's, we don't know what.
The good thing is we're in the winter months, right? So most people have turned off their irrigation systems.
Correct.
But thank you for bringing that up, because we meet every couple of weeks on this action plan we have for the next 6 months. And it's to ensure that we're engaged with the customers, that they continue their rationing, their conservation. We want to make sure that that message, we want to, each month there's going to be a topic of discussion. It's going to hopefully be, some of them are going to be a one page, some of them are going to be a card. We just want to put it out in front of the customers that we've got this new tracker tool. Please, I hope that you'll go out on the website. It is launched now, so when you go to the home page, it'll bounce up from the bottom and you can hover over it. And that's the first notice that's going to go out about that. And then we're going to talk about, the various programs that are available, the rebate programs, the long be gone, and just make sure that we're constantly reminding customers. And then the other target that we have two targets besides the continued conservation, but it's also, we've got a target to increase customers signing up for the customer portal, okay, which we're using census, and we're only at about, I can't remember if it was 8%. It's a very small number, but we're really going to push that too, because when the website bounces up, you see that's our agency consumption patterns, but we want them to be looking at their own. We want them setting their own alerts. And so we're going to really pump that program and definitely be messaging hard over these January through June. Okay, that's our target. So thanks for bringing that up, because we do have an action plan in place for that.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to management reports, general manager.
Thank you. So I don't have anything to report in this very long report, because I typically bring back, some highlights from Aqua JPIA and the Aqua conference that was held in Pasadena. And I don't have anything to report other than I should say thank you for this JPIA risk control grant program. We're applying for the 10,000 that they provide with regard to our upcoming cybersecurity assessment penetration testing. And you all were really great to do your electronic signatures on that certificate of excellency and commitment to that. I actually forgot my laptop, which I'm sure I shouldn't admit that publicly, but I had to do the grant application on my smartphone. And if any of you have ever had to do something really important on a smartphone, okay, look, I see Matt, he's got to cover his mouth. Okay, so seriously, the whole thing. And so then I get finished with it. I got to send it to Rena, but that certificate was the last thing. And fortunately, we had just signed up with DocuSign. So I really do appreciate you all being very prompt in getting your signatures on that commitment to excellence. So we'll hear back on this in March. And so that was the only thing I was going to report out of my report. Thank you.
And if there are no questions, and I'm not seeing anyone, we can go on to administrative services.
Monique, did you want to take anything?
I don't really have anything to add, except that we really made great progress on the archived record boxes. We've actually gone through almost all of them. We started with around 244, a few more were added, so we went through about 250 of the 260 boxes. So that was a big win.
Yep, it was a great, big, ugly job. So I really appreciate all the work you guys did.
Oh.
And thank you all for getting your certificates in for your harassment prevention training, etc. We appreciate that.
Yeah. My turn. So under projects here in this first page, a couple of points. The El Camino Real project, the contractor should be at a substantially complete stage next week if the weather doesn't get in the way. We don't have a report on where they're at. The contractor and our construction management team were trying to get through that process and didn't complete it in time to make it for the agenda package. But, like I said, the bigger news is that the contract is just about done there. So that's good news. And then also under projects, the emergency response plan, we submitted our certification for the emergency response plan just today. We had a meeting with Tammy to kind of go over the emergency response plan. The team was comprised of myself, the two supervisors, Michael Anderson and Brent Chester, and then management analyst Jeanette Calabolas. And we've spent the last few months putting together emergency response plan update to comply with the American Water Infrastructure Act of 2018. So that's good news. We got it done. And again, every 5 years, we'll be in the process of updating that risk and resiliency assessment along with our emergency response plan. Hopefully, we won't have to put it into place, but we do have an update to it. Under maintenance, I always like to point out the number of underground service alerts. So you see that we had 369 during the month of November. They just kind of keep climbing, you know, and under also the reports too. I mean, we've been working with 66 developments. Most of them are residential, but still, you know, we've got a lot of development activity in Belmont. Don't leave that page, Tammy. I wanted to just kind of point out the water system repairs. During the fall, when it starts getting colder, it's not unusual for us to have just a rash of water main ruptures, and that was no different in November. During November, we had 7 water main breaks and 1 service failure. And one of the bigger breaks was right in front of City Hall again. And it wasn't the water main breaking, it was literally a fire hydrant run where the pipe pushed off of Bell, you know, we don't know what caused that, just pushed off. And this thing has been in the ground for 80 years and decided to push off, you know, in November. And so it just made another mess. And if you drive down Ralston, you can see there's a piece of Ralston that needs to be replaced. We finally got the city staff to give us direction on how thick an asphalt pavement section they want in there. So we'll be working on replacing another section of Ralston where we had another water main break a little over a year ago. And then the interesting thing is also November, 1207 Old County Road, a part of Old County Road that we're going to be replacing with the capital project. We're just not there yet. We literally had 2 water main breaks in front of the same house. And so the first time it happened, the house, the renter that lived there, the water main break washed out their sewer service line. So it required the property owner to hire a sewer contractor to replace that. And so we're still kind of dealing with that matter. And then just to say, a couple weeks later, same location, we had another rupture in that 6-inch cast iron main. But you can see in the date of the installation that water main dates back to 1938. So it's pretty old. So that's the reason why we're happy that the board has supported a capital improvement program, because there's a lot of you know, old infrastructure that it just makes sense to support to make sure that we can keep the water flowing and just not have a lot of water loss. The last thing I wanted to bring up, and it's just something we forgot to. Tammy, can you go to page 74? It's the task order for Juventus for the $20,000. We wanted to get the board's thoughts on, again, just keeping these types of task orders for numbers, cost numbers, page 74, Tammy. For cost numbers that are within the, there you go, that one, that are within the general manager's signature authority. We thought we heard, and we just want to make sure that we're clear that when there is a change in work and so on, that the board wants to see these. But generally speaking, if there's a project that's maybe somewhat new and it's not maybe related to capital and it's under $25,000 signature authority, that the board's not going to see that. Or we just want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
This is based on a discussion we had a couple of months ago. I think maybe Director Zuka might have asked about it. So we just have it in our minds that if it's related to a board approved contract, even when it falls under my authority, that we're going to be bringing it to the board because it's an amendment of that originally approved board contract. Is that correct?
Matt, you've got your mic on.
Well, so here would be my take on it, and I'll let everybody else jump in, obviously. If the board approves a contract, you typically do a 10% contingency, and that's the authority the board's granted you to spend. Your authority as a general manager is to enter into independent agreements under a certain dollar amount without having to bring it to the board. 2 independent things to me personally. And so exceeding the 10% contingency, or if you didn't ask for a 10% contingency on any contract greater than $20,000 that you need a cent for, you have to bring it back to the board, which is why you ask for the 10% contingency. I mean, that's kind of just the rule I have to follow at City of San Mateo. There are certainly there's room in that to me. I think, you know, the board delegates the authority to enter and execute contracts to the general manager too, right? So if the agreement allows for changes to be made to the scope, then you can change the scope. But to me, if we approve a scope and a budget, you can't adjust the scope without coming back to the board, right? So like I said, I've used things like substantially similar, or we can talk about the specifics of it, but that to me is sort of what the board does, is we approve the contract, we approve the spending, and then, you know, if you need wiggle room, you have to ask for the wiggle room. But then the 20%, the $20,000 authority is to me an individual contract execution, not a amendment to an existing contract that's been brought to the board. Or if cumulatively it goes over your, like if you amend the contract and it goes over 20, then it would come back for the total amount. So that's the process we follow at San Mateo. There is language that we've used, like if we're change orders, for example. You know, I think on a construction job, we don't want it to, obviously can't be a fixed scope and the general manager is signing a change order. So on that, it's allowed by, if it's allowed by the contract documents, then you can do it. And so we're approving the contract documents that gives you the authority to execute a change order. That's fine. But if it's a fixed scope of work with the consultant, say, for example, on a design, adding streets, you know, adding mains, putting in mains, all that kind of stuff, moving stuff around, generally to me comes back, but you know, however the other board members feel.
Let's see, Kathy?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of say it kind of more briefly. So the $20,000 is within your signing authority, but actually we're approving a new total amount of $337,000. So if it's a contract that's 20 or less, then yes, that's within your authority. But if we're adding on to an existing contract that's above 20,000, I think it should come back to us.
That's good. And the GM authority is 25,000, I should say. We just wanted to make sure you knew why this $20,000 contract was on there. So thank you. Juben, Rene, you guys have clarity. We're all on the same page. Thank you.
Brian, you had a comment?
Oh, sorry.
I agree. That's my comment.
Okay.
Thank y'all.
Yeah. So Tammy, if you get an independent contract for something, whether it's repairs or whatever, and it's less than 25,000, you can sign for that. That would just appear on the expenditures check and nowhere else.
Yeah, or we normally will report out if we're working on those kinds of projects. You know, like for example, the cybersecurity assessment, they just updated it. So it was below 25,000. It was like at 23, 22, and we just got it updated for that grant application. So now it's like 26 or 27. So I'll be bringing that in January because it's over the 25,000. Okay, but before it would have been under, but I would have been reporting on the progress of that project and letting you know that in that staff report, here's how much that contract was, so that you would see it, because we typically still report out any of those types of professional services.
Right, good. Anyone else have any comments?
I'll just finish up by saying on this one, you know, sorry, Lucy, if you're gonna say something.
Okay.
To me, it's just like, what if you anticipate risk and you need, you know, the discretion, ask for the discretion, right? It's not about that. It's about being clear with us what discretion you're asking for more than anything else. So.
Louis, you had something?
Yeah, I have a quick question for Rena, which is totally different than what we're talking about. Rena, in one of your reports earlier, and I should have asked this question earlier, but you talked about, where was it? Okay, the district was receiving more and more applications for ADUs, auxiliary dwelling units. Do you have any idea how many? What are we talking about? And you don't have to be precise, you know, but just to give me an idea.
I'm only aware of right now 4.
for ADUs that we've had applications. Whereas I can remember Director Zuka saying in San Mateo, they had, maybe well over 100. So we're not anywhere near that scale, but they are starting to hit us. And we can see there's some laws that have been passed or are about to go into effect that are going to allow properties to split to create ADUs. And so we see that as a potential, issue from having our ability to capture capacity fees. Not necessarily rates, but the capacity fees, making sure that if they're new customers, they pay their fair share to buy into the system like everybody else has.
Correct. Yeah, and maybe, Tammy, if you recall, I brought the conversation up with DeMello from the city, and I talked specifically about, ADUs and SB9 and SB10. Remember that? And for some reason, he said that he is not anticipating that it's going to have any major impact in the city of Belmont.
No, he said he talked to us about sizes of properties and lots that could accommodate ADUs. And as I recall, it was like 20 or 30.
Yeah.
Area.
Yeah, and the FAR, the area ratio of that, it doesn't render itself to that. So I was curious when I saw this. I said, oh, I wonder if we are getting a lot. 4 is not few, but they are manageable. They're not too many. So we'll keep an eye on those too. Okay, that's it. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
So let's see.
We don't have any other reports. The district engineer didn't have a written report. And then, of course, we've postponed these financials until next month.
Okay, so 9C is director's reports. In no particular order. Lewis?
I don't think I have anything this month. So thank you.
Okay. Matt?
Nothing to report, thanks.
Brian?
Nothing to report.
Kathy?
Nothing to report, thanks.
And I went to the HIA meeting this month with Rena. They were mostly talking about a new development. Who the developer did a presentation for a new tech building at Old County Road in Harbor. So they were surprised at how many different jurisdictions and so on they were going to have to deal with, and how many utilities they were going to have to deal with. But both the planning director from San Carlos and the planning director from Belmont basically emphasized that they were going to their board or discussion of SB9 matters in terms of trying to get some definition as to what actually they're going to be allowed to do to control or restrict both ADUs and lot splits going forward. They know they have a big requirement for new housing, but at the same time, they aren't quite sure what the nitty-gritty details of zoning ordinance restrictions versus the state laws. So they know they're not going to be able to enforce some of the parking restrictions, but that doesn't mean the floor area ratios need to change too much or whatever. So that was where they were headed. So that was sort of a carry through from your question, Lewis. So
the developer was for that life science development, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Who presented? Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. That's a huge project.
It's a good sized project. I've forgotten. It's 6-10 acres type of thing. They put together several properties.
Yeah. That's huge for Belmont.
Right. Tammy, do we have any communications?
We do not from staff.
Okay. So I guess we can adjourn and go to closed session. It would probably be worthwhile to take a 5-minute break in that transition. So let's see, I make it 9:33, so let's make sure we're up and running before 9:45 or so. Okay?
And Julie's staff sent you all the link, and Louis, I just forwarded it to you. Okay?
Happy holidays.
Got it. Thank you.
Merry
Tammy,
Christmas,
do you
everybody.
need to leave this on or not?
I'll stay out and leave it on. Yeah. See
Okay.
y'all in a
Happy
bit.
holidays, everyone.
Good night, Monique and Brenna.
All right. Good night. Have a good one.
Yep. See y'all later. So we're back at 10:15.
Mhm.
All right. No report.
So, yeah, so we're reconvening and there's no reportable action.
All right. And then we're out. Thank you guys so much. Have a great evening. Kirk, I'm going to send you that reso for the grant app next, okay, for your signature, so that I can get that sent over to the group tomorrow so they can get that grant application package submitted to DWR, okay? So I'll send it your way for e-signature.
So do I have to do it tonight or?
Nope, you can
first
do it in
thing
the
in the morning?
morning. As long as you can do it first thing in the morning, that would be amazing.
Okay.
Thank you. See
Good
you
night, guys.
guys.
Have a nice
Happy
night.
holidays.
What's left
All
of
right.
it.
Thank you. All right. Take care. See you, Julie.
Bye.
Bye.